Hey guys, this is Gail Kim from Impact Wrestling, and you are listening to the 8-Bit Suplex Podcast.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in once again to the 8-Bit Suplex here on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. We got a very special edition of the show for you this week. It is, of course, at that time of year that all the ghouls and goblins and super ghouls and goblins are out in force. We're going to do things a little bit differently this week. We have a guest host filling in here for Sandy for the video game portion. And it's going to be a longtime friend of mine. We go way, way, way back. He's not really wrestling savvy, so he won't stick around for that part of the show. So we'll lead off with video games for the first time ever, which is kind of exciting. I'm going to introduce my good buddy, Mr. Layne Farman. Layne, how are you tonight, buddy?
Good. I'm doing good. How are you doing? I'm glad to be here, and I want to learn more about wrestling so that one day I can be on that part of the show too.
We'll work our way up to it. Layne, you did attend WrestleMania 34 in New Orleans with me.
Yes.
And I think we had a pretty good time, and we watched some classic matches during that trip to get you more acclimated with the product. And you watched what was, I believe, Cactus Jack's debut in the WWE, and you've been kind of in love with Mick Foley ever since, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I that love has just grown. I follow him on Twitter, and then I watched that movie that was like this documentary that it was called, like, I don't even remember, like something about the mat.
Beyond the Mat.
Him. Yeah. And then Mick Foley's like a big part of that movie. So now, yeah, that's great. I want to get like a Cactus Jack, some sort of merch or paraphernalia, but yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely Cactus Jack or Dude Love or Mankind. Mrs. Foley's baby boy is definitely one of our all-time favorites here on the show. He actually does show up on Impact, which is the show, of course, that we cover. Or at least it was TNA back in the day, Total Nonstop Action. They've now since changed their name to Impact. But if you're listening to the show, you probably already know that. That's more educational for Layne's purposes.
Yeah, thank you.
so we can continue to work our way up to getting Layne to talk about wrestling someday. But yeah, so Layne's here. We have we're kind of coming up with this different ideas to talk about video games right here in the holiday season. Of course, we kick off our holiday season here in the United States with Halloween here. So with Halloween coming up, we are going to talk about, and now this is, we're normally a podcast of positivity. We don't normally talk down on our subject matter here. But you know what? It's Halloween. Everything's upside down. Black is white. White is black. The magic is in the air, Layne. So we're going to talk about games that are so bad, they are in fact scary.
Nice.
So,
I like that.
Layne, I had Layne, for those of you that don't know Layne, he is someone I consider to be a video game aficionado. At one time, the only man I knew that had a bigger video game collection than me, probably still does, as mine has kind of dwindled over the years some to a smaller amount. But Layne at one point had, what did you say, about 4 bookcases worth of video games?
Yeah, they're actually, so just recently, a couple months ago, since we just had a baby, he's 7 months old today, and my wife and I, were negotiating about, where that stuff was going to end up. We actually just had to get a storage unit for it. So now all that stuff is in a little climate-controlled storage unit. So it's actually much easier to access. So back in the good old days that you're talking about, everything was plugged in at the same time. I had 4 different splitters so that, if I wanted to play the Sega Saturn and then, the 3DO, like right after, or whatever, I could do that. Now it's more of a long process, but all that stuff still exists. So yeah, I don't know how many bookcases, but it's at least one 5x10 storage unit right now.
Which is, it's impressive. I mean, it really is. I know Layne and I used to go and hit up the local flea markets and and try and see what Redneck had brought out a blanket worth of stuff that he had no clue what he was, try and get a good deal out of it. And you did at one point, Layne, if memory serves, find an extremely rare game on a blanket that a Redneck put out, and he had absolutely no idea what he had.
Yeah, it's one of the best days of my life, actually. It was because that's still the crown jewel of my collection, Spider-Man Web of Fire, which could totally be on this list, actually, because that game is horrible. But
It is not good.
no, not at all. But the game is worth almost $1,000 now, and I bought it for $3. So, and as you know,
Right.
when I was in high school, I knew about it because back in those days, I would be looking on eBay every day and trying to snipe these lots and everything. So I very much knew what was worth something and what was not. I'm a little rusty now, but like once I saw that, like I thought I was dreaming. Like I couldn't believe it. So that's still one of the best moments of finding something in the wild. And it was like complete in box, manual, everything. Yeah. So that was great.
Yeah, at that point, I mean, we're talking, this is like almost in the 20 teens at this point, I would imagine. And to get a game that was for the 32X that was released, and I'm looking at this right now, it was released in January of 1996.
Yeah.
Which at that point, I believe we already have the Nintendo 64 out. We're pretty close to the PlayStation if we don't already have it. So Sega was trying pretty much everything. And I think the Dreamcast, do you remember when the Dreamcast came out? It's right around this time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I know that like the Saturn had to be between them though. There's kind of a weird thing because like then there was the Saturn. That was one of the reasons why they kind of stopped making the 32X stuff so fast.
There you go. Yeah.
But then they gave up the Saturn really fast too. So all that stuff is real close together.
Yeah, so the Sega Dreamcast was 1998 in Japan, 99, early 99 in the US. And then the Sega Saturn was already out in North America. It was May 11th, 1995. And so Spider-Man Web of Fire was doomed before it started.
Yeah.
Coming out in 1996 and almost a full year after the Saturn, which was the superior system, was on the market. But that's
unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, to come across in Largo, Florida, Spider-Man Web of Fire on just a random blanket in an outdoor flea market is, which is unfortunately closed now due to COVID.
I know, man.
Which was a longtime staple of the area. I had heard of people coming from up north specifically to vacation to visit the Whack and Wheel Flea Market in Largo, Florida, which I guess growing up less than 10 minutes away from it, Layne, I think I probably took it for granted some.
Absolutely. Well, I used to work there. I used to cut onions for them.
I used to take you to that job.
I know. And I used to say, and I hold to this now, that I would rather spend a day at the flea market than Disney World. Like easy, not even close. Not even close.
I might disagree with you on that one, but I would say that you would definitely spend a lot less money at the flea market. As long as you're not buying euros, because you got to pay for some medication afterwards.
Yeah, seriously.
Because euros with tzatziki sauce in 102 degrees and a July day is, man, not great.
Yeah.
But anywho, so when we start talking about some of these games, why don't you talk about Spider-Man Web of Fire a little bit? Now that we've brought it up, and you said it kind of belongs on this list here. Now, I mean, most Spider-Man games of the era were pretty much the side-scrolling beat-em-up games.
Yeah, and this is pretty much the same. Now I'll talk a little bit about Spider-Man, and then I'll kind of transition into another 32X game.
Sure.
Because I never played, so I was like scared because I had just come across this game and I knew that it was worth a lot. I was like, do I play this? It wasn't sealed or anything. It was just in the box. And as a collector, I'm of music and of games. I'm very much of the mindset that like I'm gonna play it. I'm gonna play it. Like I don't really collect things that are sealed in box because like if I have it, I sort of want to play it.
Sure.
But because this one was worth so much more than some of the other stuff I had, I was like, I don't even know if I want to do that, but I did, and I couldn't even get past like maybe the first couple screens just because it wasn't fun.
Right.
And yeah, it, like what you're saying, it's like a side scroller. It actually, so another thing, I guess you've you said you've already talked about Batman Forever on this podcast before,
Right.
but it looks kind of like that game where you could tell that they sort of did the Mortal Kombat thing where they tried to like animate maybe with some
Right, that very early motion capture
yeah.
technology. Yeah.
Yeah. So all I remember about Web of Fire is that it uses that. The enemy types are not they're pretty like generic, and it feels slow, you know. So I mean, as a Spider-Man game, you know, it doesn't really feel like Spider-Man because you're just kind of like slowly walking from thing to thing.
I gotcha.
But I think so. If we're gonna talk about the 3-2-X though, we have to talk about Corpse Killer, which is the next the other thing.
Yeah, let's go right into Corpse Killer here. Now, Corpse Killer is you know, if you stepped into any arcade in the mid '90s, you were playing games like, you know, Area 51. You were playing games like Time Crisis. You know, what we call rail shooters, right? So basically, to set the premise, for those that may not be familiar with a rail shooter, you basically you have progressed through and you shoot everything on the screen. The difference with a home console version is that you're not pumping quarters, and that's really what those games were designed to make. They were designed to make money. So with the home release here of Corpse Killer, this one is a little bit different because it's I've played this with you a few times, and I'll let you get into it some. But it is. Can you even say graphics? I mean, it's not really graphics. It's just so it was trying to Sega at the time was trying to release a lot of those full motion video games, or FMVs as we call them, and they decided to mix that with a rail shooter here.
It's like an unholy match, like
yeah. And so this was developed by Digital Pictures, and I'm looking, you know, Digital Pictures is of course the same company that gave us Night Trap.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've never played that, but that totally would be a great like thing to go on a So Bad It's Scary list.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could pretty much, I think you could fill a So Bad It's Scary list with nothing but SMV, or not SMV, FMV games.
Yeah.
Because they really did not work for the most part. Unless you want to talk about some of the really cartoony ones. But yeah, so same for those that are familiar with Night Trap, same exact people decided they were going to make a rail shooter using their same FMV technology.
Yeah, and I love FMV because of how like weird it is, because it's one of these things where they were trying to do something that they just had they weren't even close to having the technology to do, you know. So
Right.
it's almost like a Virtual Boy level mistake, where it's like because I think it's a great idea, and actually there might be one or two that are actually good. So there's Wing Commander 3, which is starring Mark Hamill and John Rhys Davies, is like a FMV game that's like great. So
Right.
I mean, they did pull it off, you know.
Well, that's also because they actually got good actors to be a part of it.
Right.
And you know, for those that aren't not familiar with FMV games, they are people that are hired to act in these games, and basically shoot every scenario as a scene, and then the choices that you make change what happens in that scene. And that could be based on inventory items that you have or don't have, how slow you are to react to something. But then this one is straight up just shooting zombies.
Yeah. And like, and what's weird is that this one and some other FMV games that are like this, there's a lot of pretending like you are the main character, and so there's a lot of people that are like right in your face talking to you, that and like telling you to do things, and it's very like this one especially is very B movie-esque too. But so there's these like cutscenes that are I mean they're really fun to watch, they're funny, they're really bad, the acting's horrible, you know. But then the actual gameplay, it's still kind of an FMV thing, but it's almost like a slideshow. It's like, so you see like a picture of a zombie
Right.
that actually exists. Like someone actually had to like dress up like a zombie, I think.
Right.
But then they run it through several frames of like attacking you. So it's just and it looks really strange, and it's hard to know where they are, and it's just a really strange experience.
Yeah, and we were saying, and just to step back, like you're talking about, like you play as a unnamed Marine in the game, where you're just kind of helicopter dropped into an island because God knows why. Um, and it reminds me too, and this is a game I played a lot of, and I won't get too much into it because it probably could be saved for uh, another episode, either for Star Wars games or for FMV games or for rail shooter games, because it was all of those. And that's Star Wars Rebel Assault. I don't know if you ever played that one.
I like that one a lot.
It was actually a lot of fun, but you literally play as a young pilot going through, trying to get through the Rebel Academy and learn how to fly your ship and everything. But your name is Rookie One. That is so completely unnamed. And if you think that people aren't going to call you that by that name, you are wrong. Uh, they will literally to your face, and not as a call sign. They'll call you Rookie One to your face when you're like riding speeder bikes, like Rookie One, what are you doing here? And you know what? Hey, listen, hats off to those actors because, damn it, I mean that's a paying gig, so you can't you
No,
can't knock them for that, you know?
I would love to talk to someone that was in Corpse Killer. I mean, so a couple things I have
Sure,
to
yeah.
say about the one is that there's a version of this game that I have that I really love because it's a Sega CD 32X game. So you have to
Right.
actually have the Genesis, the Sega CD, and the 32X to play this. I don't know if that's supposed to make it better. I think they advertised that it was like the powers combined of these two systems.
Right.
But I think there's only two. I think Fahrenheit is one, and then Corpse Killer are like maybe the only two that were released as a Sega CD 32X game. Uh,
I think you're right. Yeah.
yeah,
That
and then
sounds
the
about right.
other, yeah, and then the other thing is that my friend and I were playing this game, and the C button, like crashes the game and sends you to the title screen, like just by pressing C.
Yes.
So, so,
They forgot to,
so
well, when there's three buttons to program, Lane, I mean, you've spent so much time programming A and B. I mean, programming the C button. Like, come on, man. Like,
well,
they're not a big name studio here.
well, yeah, and it's like you always are like trying to figure out what button does what, and so you're like, oh, A does this, B does this, what does C do, and then it
And then
crashes the
it
game and
resets the
sends
game.
you back
Right.
to and it takes you a little while to figure out what's happening, and then so when we figured out that C, like breaks the game, we like lost it. That was it. That like made this game go on this list. That was like my favorite thing.
Yeah. So, and when I do want to mention too, like, as we're kind of going through these games, these are games that we have firsthand experience with, games that we've tried to play numerous times, and it just never worked out. And for whatever reason, these games don't necessarily show up on the big, the angry video game nerds. Some of them may. I think one of them that I'm going to talk about is some that's gotten some notoriety, but it's one that I bought at a used video game store and was super excited to give it a try. And maybe I'll go to that one next.
Yeah, go for it.
But yeah, so these are not, we're not going to talk about Superman 64. We're not going to talk about ET. I mean, God, there's been what 17 documentaries about the ET video game, right? Like, whoever made that game, he's gone beyond embarrassment to I'm going to cash in and tell my story to as many documentarians as they want. Um, so yeah, I mean, you want to hear about ET, Atari, listen, by all means, go right ahead and do that.
Yeah,
Before we move on, I do want to point out that yes, Fahrenheit is a 32x CD game, but they also released Night Trap for the Sega CD
no
32X,
way.
and they also released a game called Supreme Warrior, which I'm just now finding out about just now as I'm looking at, and it literally looks like um, first person hand to hand combat, but full motion video, and it
Wow,
looks unbelievably unbelievably bad.
that's amazing.
I'm gonna throw this to you in the chat, so
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
I will
take a
buy
look.
that. I want to buy
Like,
that right
I
now.
it is, and it has a release on the Sega CD first. And it's just a bunch of like stereotypical Asian characters standing around watching you fist fight people. It is, wow. That's you know what? Throw that onto the list too,
Yes.
because the fact that somebody thought that was a good idea is oof,
Yeah.
not great, not
I'm
great.
gonna I'm gonna buy that. I'm gonna buy all those CD32X games because that's I
Well,
want to have
you
those.
you got one out of four, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you got some work to do. But the game that I mentioned that I'm going to talk about here, and before we move on, by the way, Corpse Killer was remastered for the PS4 eStore, and I believe also for the Nintendo Switch Online Store. Inexplicably, uh, but I think Nightwalk also got, or not, no, wait, Night Trap also got that same kind of treatment where it's now showing up like it's cool to be so bad.
Night
So I
Trap's
think,
supposed to be fun though. That one is supposed to be fun to play. Uh,
well,
yeah,
I never got too much into it because it literally it freaked the shit out of me as a kid.
yeah,
So like those like little the slow motion vampires, because I don't know, man, it's just nonsense. But
yeah, yeah.
we'll move on from there.
From slow
So,
motion vampires.
yeah, from slow motion vampires, we'll go to slow motion idiots.
Hmm.
And that is the Three Stooges on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Um, it this is a game that came out on a lot, and I do mean a lot of systems. The one I played it on is the Nintendo Entertainment System. But if you were so fortunate, you could have played it on the Game Boy Color. Actually, nope. Sorry, that one was canceled. They never put it on the Game Boy Color because why would you? Um, but they put it on the Nintendo, the PC, the Commodore 64, um, and it's even showed up on things like the Apple II and the Amiga. So it is actually published by Activision, and I say that to say Activision games are normally good, um, but I think it's something where they published it for the NES, so they took the original game and just tried to port it over, and man, it is completely unplayable.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and they try and reenact famous Three Stooges gags, and they walk under a ladder and smack their foreheads, and it's literally just I mean it's just so bad. I mean, when I say like you can't play it, like you cannot play it, and there's a randomized level selection, right?
Oh,
So you don't even get to choose what level you play. You don't
oh my
start at level
goodness.
one. You're playing different scenes, right? So like there's a boxing thing. There's oh, and they're supposed to be based off of Three Stooges episodes,
Right,
which
right.
you and I are both big Three Stooges fans.
I mean,
That sounds. I mean,
yeah,
that sounds great. I
yeah.
mean, I just assume everyone's a Three Stooges fan because how could you not? But
Right. Well, I mean, I've enjoyed the Three Stooges. I watched a lot of it a long time ago, but I haven't. I'm pretty rusty, so I don't remember a lot of it. But
yeah, and I don't think it was anything that was inherently problematic for the time. Thinking back, so it's not. I don't think I have to like say like, oh, I have to watch this through 2020 eyes now.
right, right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, man, it is. Oof.
I'm trying to think of how you would make a good Three Stooges game. Like, what would you, because that the concept like of doing different episodes might be fine, but like not in that weird mini game. I don't even know kind of
Yeah,
way. Yeah,
yeah. I don't think you can.
yeah,
And but this is also during a time, right, in the late 80s where every video game publisher was trying to get their hands on naming rights. So, of course, and this probably started, back in the ET days. I mean, it did start back then. It wasn't necessarily ET wasn't the first, I don't think. But there's tons of games that are just piss poor,
yeah.
horrible games that are completely unplayable, but they carry a name on it.
Right.
Jaws comes to mind on the NES, of course, famously published by LJN.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
LJN obviously were the masters of that,
Yeah.
just gobbling up every single thing they could, um, and just pushing just oh, absolute garbage.
When did you spend a lot of time playing the Three Stooges? Like, did you put a lot of hours into that?
I probably played it for off and on, probably about like 2 hours total.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
But now that doesn't sound like a lot of time. Um, and certainly, I mean, I was playing it probably in probably 16, 17 years old. Um, but I paid like $6 for it, which,
Yeah.
listen, I understand that's not expensive for a video game. But in 2007, for a game that came out in 1987, to pay $6 and not playable, it wasn't even like it's rare. Like, I was just like, I didn't feel like haggling. I just was like,
Right.
whatever. Yeah, I bought it. And it, it's just bad. It's
You
just,
know
I
some.
mean,
Yeah. Some kid paid like $60 for that, like probably back in the 80s or 90s.
oh yeah. I mean, could you imagine like if you go back and play like all these different games that were, you think about like the era of Blockbuster, like you would get to pick one game.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
unless you're rich, if your parents are rich, then you got two games, right? Or if your parents just do like, yeah, that's our entertainment for the weekend. Listen, everyone views their entertainment budget differently. In my house, it was you choose one and you're lucky if you get one, right? So, so it was like, okay, yeah, I'll pick this up. And I've certainly rented games, and there's plenty I'm sure that I cannot think of today, but I'm sure I've rented plenty of unplayable games.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
And
I feel like on the NES there's a lot of that, like, and there's a lot of unplayable games now too. But I mean, and you would never know, that the Three Stooges would be, or Back to the Future is another one that's like really bad, where you'd be stoked to pick that up and play it, and then just come
yeah,
home and it'd be so awful.
yeah, I mean, like, and think too, like, at the same time that was happening, there were companies like Capcom licensing The Little Mermaid,
Right.
right? And I will tell you this, and I'll state this on this podcast for everyone to hear: The Little Mermaid is like a top 10 NES game.
Oh yeah.
I like full on. It is. It's like it's a uh, what's the phrase I want to use? It's obviously it's a side scrolling, almost like a platformer, but it is kind of like that on rails shooting type thing. But you can go back and forth. So it's a four-way movement side scrolling game with you're shooting projectiles as Ariel, the Little Mermaid, and it's absolutely
Sounds
awesome.
amazing. That
Dude,
sounds awesome.
I'm not kidding when I say it is like far and away like it is so good. Um, I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, on
th-
the Super Nintendo, Capcom did Aladdin, which I think is like in the top 10 Super Nintendo games.
yeah, no, Aladdin was really good. And what's funny is too is they actually, and not to get off on a tangent about licensed video games, which we've already done, and which this is going to happen. Fair warning, and maybe I should have said this at the top. Layne and I don't. This is historically accurate for us that we will just start on something and just bounce around,
Yeah,
because that's how we've always been. It's
it's
just
my
the way it
fault
is.
probably. I don't know.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's my fault too. You never know. Um, but yeah, I mean, Capcom also did DuckTales,
Yep,
um, and I did they do? I don't think they did Lion King.
I
I'm trying
don't
to think.
know. No, I don't think so.
No.
They did Chip
So
and Dale Rescue Rangers. They did
Virgin
Tailspin.
Interactive did
Oh, okay,
Lion King,
okay.
and I think they also did Toy Story also.
Yeah, those are not as good, and those are not as good.
They're not. They're a lot more unplayable.
Yeah.
But there's even a game, Adventures in the Magic Kingdom, that Capcom put out. So Capcom was working pretty close with Disney. Definitely go check out those games if you want to play a
Yeah.
licensed video game. Stay the fuck away from the Three Stooges.
Seriously,
So
seriously. Yeah.
just don't. It's like even if you see it for like 99 cents, just hand the clerk $5 and punch him in the face.
There you go.
That's a better use of your money.
That would be
Except
very Three Stooges esque too. That'd be a Three Stooges
well, yeah,
like thing to do.
here's just hold out your hand and say pick two, and then poke them in the eyes.
There you go.
But maybe not during COVID. Maybe wait until that's over, so you're not,
Yes.
you
Yeah,
know.
Three Stooges would be a nightmare in COVID. I don't even want to. Someone
There'll
should
just
make
be
that.
so much like masks snapping off the face.
Yeah.
Like, why are you?
That's perfect. It's built for it. That's amazing.
It pretty much is. It is, there's some gag where they let it slip off their ears and the elastic snaps the guy's hand. Ah,
Yep.
I don't know. There's only so many jokes you could do with the mask. But you know what? I'm actually going to use that as a segue to the next game that you came with here, Layne, and that's Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker on the
Oh yeah,
PlayStation 1.
that's a good one. So this is not going to be on any of those like worst games of all times list because this is personal. This is like a personal vendetta. So, I was so into Batman, when I was in high school, and I I loved all the Batman movies. I didn't think any of them were bad. Like I loved Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, loved them, like completely unironically loved them.
Sure, yeah.
And then, Batman Beyond comes out, and that's actually really good. Like Batman Beyond is really good. It's not as good as the, Kevin Conroy animated series, but it's like pretty good. And the Return
Well,
of the Joker's,
Will Friedle is fantastic as Terry
oh
McGinnis,
yeah,
the
absolutely.
the future Batman or the Batman from Beyond, if you will.
Yeah. And I don't remember much about the show really now, but I remember watching Return of the Joker. I think we got it at the video store, and I just remember it being amazing. I remember just being so into it. So then, when I saw that this game, and a lot of times they'd advertise these things together, you like the movie, get the game. The game was probably even advertised in the trailers of the thing that I was watching. It's one of those games that has the same cover as the movie poster too.
Yes,
Uh,
it is identical. In fact, when I put it in the Google search, the nothing came up about the game. I actually had to write in video game into the search bar because it is the exact same name, the exact same poster. And before I let you get into it, I will say I actually did rewatch this like within the last 3 months because HBO Max has all that. I get HBO Max for free with my phone subscription, so
nice.
I mean, I think that's the way that they're getting people to sign up
Oh,
for it.
definitely.
Um,
Absolutely.
and it's certainly no thanks to John Oliver constantly ragging on HBO Max, which is great.
Yeah, that is
Um,
great.
but yeah, no, the movie definitely holds up. Now,
Yeah,
if you've never watched Batman Beyond and you don't know why there's like hybrid animal people running around, the splicers, it will confuse the absolute out of you for like 40 minutes. But it definitely holds up very well.
that's awesome. Yeah. And so as a kid, I mean, it's actually good Batman, right? So I've been watching these bad Batman movies and loving them. So now it's like a really good one. So like it's blowing my
Right.
mind. And the cool thing about, and I'll get into why the game is bad, but I just remember that you have this feeling when you buy a new game. And I was really looking forward to this game too, where you get up in the next morning after you played it, the day before, and you're like excited to play it again. You're like, oh, I gotta get,
Right.
playing that game again. I just remember like it was yesterday, like playing this game and then getting up the next morning and like just wanting to do anything except for play this game again. Like, I remember I wanted to like it so bad, and I wanted to wake up, and I tried to like simulate that feeling, and I was just like, I do not want to play that. But I think that it was the kind of thing where I made myself play it, and I was trying to like it so bad that I just played hours and hours of this game. And I would even make my friends watch me play this game because I wanted to show them, this game and everything. And all the stuff that's cool about Batman Beyond, it's Batman, but he's got like jet propulsion and stuff.
Right.
He's a lot more mobile. It's a lot faster. It's sleeker. Uh, just all of that is like the opposite of how this game plays. It's sluggish. It's slow. It's repetitive. It's like basically it's like a beat 'em up like Final Fight or something, but it's with fully like 3D, figures, and so the movement's not fluid, and so it's like this weird. It's kind of, there's a few other. There was a game like The Crow that was kind of like this too, where it's like trying to do this Final Fight or Golden Axe or like side-scrolling beat 'em up kind of thing, but using 3D characters, and it's just terrible, and it just doesn't work. And yeah, it was just a slog
Now,
of a game.
and what's interesting too is that you can actually switch between suits in the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation versions. And I point that to say the Game Boy Color version does not get any kind of suit switching or anything like that because it's Game Boy
Gotcha.
Color, obviously, so there's some limitations. But yeah, I mean, I think games started playing around with that kind of different loadout, right, to do different things.
Yeah.
And in a Batman game, it makes sense, right? I mean, Batman himself has had many different suits, and they have different things. Um, but yeah, I don't think any of it worked very well. And the game was published actually by Ubisoft, which is kind of a shocker that they would make a game that doesn't work because I mean, they hit more than they miss. Um, there's a funny review when they're talking about the reception of this game. A writer named Greg Orlando wrote, he gave it 1 star out of 5 and wrote, "Jingle bells, Batman smells, Ubi laid an egg."
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, which of course, Jingle bells, Batman smells. I don't know about you, Lane, but that was the Christmas Carol of choice as a child for me because singing traditional Christmas carols with my family and enjoying all the Yuletide blessings was not a thing that I cared about as a child. I would much rather sing parodies and, you
Oh,
know,
absolutely.
which is probably why Weird Al was the only CD I listened to when I was 8 years old because,
No, that's great.
and actually, I mean, I still listen to him, so I guess not much has changed.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, and no, I remember that. I remember those songs. That's great. I need to look up bad reviews of this game because I don't think I ever have, and I think that it's been a long time coming because that was a big disappointment. I mean, I still feel that.
Yeah, it's really difficult because and Dan and I, when Dan filled in for Sandy, we talked at length about good Batman games because there are plenty of those. But when you pick up a franchise like a Batman, or you pick up a franchise like a Spider-Man, even, you have a certain expectation of what that game should look like and what that game should feel like because it should be based on what those characters are. And there's been Spider-Mans that are games that have not been good,
Hmm.
and it's the same way. And obviously, Web of Fire, one that is probably played by more people has been like the recent, like the Amazing Spider-Man 2, which was a game I stayed away from. It was a movie I stayed away from, and both of them were not good. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things that it's so hard, especially I think with when we look back at these games that are uh, in the 80s and early 90s, you can kind of excuse it, right? People didn't really know what they were doing with games yet. It was still a budding industry. But by the time that a game like Batman Beyond the Rise of Joker comes out, or Return of Joker, excuse me, and it's that game came out in 2000. I mean, Ubisoft knew what they were doing at that point.
Yeah,
And this just feels like a cash grab.
absolutely. And they even do the thing where they're telling the story, like all the plot moments are just like frozen frames where the text would be at the bottom. It's
Yeah.
just bare minimum. Yeah,
Which, and at that point, the whole point of the PlayStation is that you didn't have to do that anymore.
exactly.
So, that's the whole reason why Squaresoft left Nintendo in the dust for Final Fantasy VII, right? Because they wanted to do, full motion cutscenes and tell stories with video and not just text. And here we
Yeah,
are. I mean, Final Fantasy VII came out years before this game, and there's really no excuse to it.
yeah,
Understanding, of course, that it's a 1 disc game versus a 3 disc game,
right.
but also, and if I had to guess, I mean, you could probably beat this game in what, 3 hours,
Yeah,
four
I would get
hours
to that.
tops.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, I know
tops.
you
Yeah,
didn't get that far, so
I think I might have beat it. I don't.
did
I
you?
think I might have beat it. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, well, playing bad games and a beloved series definitely happens, especially when they decide that they're going to push new things into the game and interject new gameplay modes. And that happened actually for 989 Studios game. And we're going to stick on the PlayStation and we're going to talk about Twisted Metal 3.
oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Twisted Metal, for those that are not familiar, was kind of came on the heels of Mario Kart being huge, Mario Kart 64 being huge, and 989 Studios, which correct me if I'm wrong, Lane. 989 Studios was exclusively to Sony. It was just a division of Sony.
Yeah,
Um,
I think so. And I know that they took over Twisted Metal 3. It was a
right,
different. Yeah,
different
yeah,
publisher for the first two. And then
yeah,
Sony's like, we're just gonna make this in house and probably pay less to make it. Um, and the first two Twisted Metal games, for those that are not familiar with Twisted Metal, it's vehicular combat. That's it. You get
yeah,
missiles, you get machine guns. There was a whole bunch of games that came out in this time frame of the late 90s, early 2000s, centered around specifically vehicular combat because everyone, you and I have played countless rounds of Mario Kart
oh yeah,
Battle,
yeah,
uh,
oh yeah,
which is, I mean, listen, anybody can beat their friend at a race, right? But can you hit? But who's the best at throwing green shells? That's what everyone wanted to know, and I
Yep.
think that's why like vehicular combat really took off in the late '90s, early 2000s. Games like Vigilante 8 came out on the Nintendo 64. Of course, Twisted Metal was kind of the pioneer, and everyone loved Twisted Metal 1. Everyone loved Twisted Metal 2. And then Twisted Metal 3, with 989 Studios behind the helm, it kind of takes a dump.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah,
All I remember.
go ahead and
Well,
get into it a little bit here, because this is one that was off of your list here.
yeah. Well, one thing the couple things I remember about this is that this is one of the first Twisted Metal games I played a lot of. So one of the reasons why I hate this game is that I played it so much. I think I even beat it with every character, and then I played a good Twisted Metal game, and I felt all this despair that I had sunk so much time into the mediocre one, because it's just, all the things that are so good about Twisted Metal, like it's gritty and like the stories are great and funny, and like you want to beat the game because every character has like an end cutscene that's hilarious, and they get
Right.
it's always they if they win the Twisted Metal competition, they can make a wish, and their wish always goes really bad, almost like a Twilight Zone episode or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the ones in Twisted Metal 3 are so unimaginative and bad. Like you get to the end of the game and then you see the cutscene and you're like angry at how like at how bad the joke is that they made, And I mean, talking about FMV stuff, the first game has full motion video cutscenes for those
Right.
end of game scenes, and they're amazing and they're so good. And even the latest Twisted Metal that came out on PS3 and like Xbox 360, they went back to that full motion video thing, and it's amazing, and they do such a good job. So this one is more just like a game that I put a lot of time into, and then was so realized what a good Twisted Metal game was after the fact.
Yeah. So, I mean, and what's interesting too is that almost universally, everyone's like, "Man, this game wasn't good." I mean, it wasn't kind of pushing anything. It wasn't any better than what they had done before. And I think this was the first one that they tapped Rob Zombie to be the composer of.
Yeah.
And so
He does the whole
everyone,
soundtrack.
I'm reading, and I remember the soundtrack being awesome. But the every reviewer is like, yeah, the soundtrack's great. Well, of course it's great because it's Rob
Yeah.
Zombie. I mean, they actually
Yeah.
got, when you hear a game like Twisted Metal, it better be, punch you in the nuts death metal versus,
Absolutely.
but yeah, I mean, it was not, it wasn't rated very well, but it did sell over 1 million copies. But when you get into a game series building off of that popular genre, um, I mean, you back in those days, you could sell 1 million copies of
Oh yeah.
anything that was a sequel.
Oh yeah. Well,
So
the one good thing. So what I love about Twisted Metal 3 is that I wasn't allowed to listen to Rob Zombie. I wasn't allowed to listen to any of that. I
sure,
even had to, on my Tony Hawk games, I had to make it so certain songs wouldn't play. I had to go in the settings. Like my parents made me turn some of the songs off.
yeah,
And but Twisted Metal 3, if you put it in your Walkman, it would play the Rob Zombie songs. So I had basically the sound. I had a Rob Zombie CD, and that would never have been allowed. But since Twisted Metal 3 was like rated teen or whatever, and I got this Rob Zombie CD out of the. So I remember like going to bed and listening to that and feeling like I was really bad.
yeah, and what's you make that point. It is rated teen, like you're no doubt absolutely slaughtering the other drivers.
Yeah,
Um,
seriously.
but there's this kind of you can kind of put this thought away of it being other drivers that you're killing because you never see the drivers while you're playing. I think there might be a few vehicles that you can, but yeah, I mean, for the most part, you're just blowing up cars, so they get away
Yeah,
with the teen rating. And
right.
yeah, I mean, we had similar upbringings in that regard, where vulgar music and things. I definitely did have to. Depending on which Tony Hawk game and which um, soundtrack it was, or even just like cutscenes in certain
Oh
later
yeah,
later Tony Hawk games, especially with Bam Margera involved. I definitely had to skip ahead on those.
yeah, for sure.
Which if you've listened to our podcast since the beginning, we did a Tony Hawk episode pretty early on. So definitely go check that out if you haven't. I I talked probably too much on that podcast episode because I played a lot more Tony Hawk than Sandy did. But definitely go check that out if you want to, reminisce about those days. And before we move on from this one, Layne, I do want to talk about when we talk about how big vehicular combat games were. There was even a Star Wars vehicular combat game.
I played that game so much.
Star Wars Demolition came out on the PS1, and it was just one of those things where literally everything revolved around cars just blowing the shit out of each other.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look down the list, but that's the one that kind of sticks out the most because it's Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, there's basically every racing game that came out had some combat to it as well. So, even a game like Extreme G on the Nintendo 64, I don't know if you played that one much, but it was basically a futuristic motorcycle game, but you shot missiles at each other as you were racing. So, vehicular combat hasn't disappeared entirely, especially if you played the Mad Max game that came out in 2015. But it's a little different, right? That's a story-driven game, but strictly vehicular combat. It doesn't really exist anymore in the same way. But definitely go and play the other Twisted Metal games. Like Twisted Metal Black, I think is probably.
Dude,
would you
so
say
good.
would you say Twisted Metal Black is the best one?
I think so. Twisted Metal Black is probably the best. That one you do see the bodies like that. They really that was like the one that could be rated M, and then the new one that was just called Twisted Metal was amazing.
Okay, I didn't get to that. I didn't get around to that one, so I'll have to definitely go back and check that out.
Yeah.
And then we'll switch over to this one because I'm going to save my other one for last because it's kind of maybe a gasper as far as people wouldn't expect me to say it.
Gotcha.
Especially if you listen to this podcast, you kind of can pick up on where my tastes are. But speaking of tastes, we're going to talk about a video game character that was first made famous for eating ghosts. That never really got a true sequel, I guess, in a sense, because we originally have Pac-Man, and then we just put a bow on him and call him Mrs. Pac-Man. And then we get, with the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo, Pac-Man 2, The New Adventures. And it's described, Layne, as a graphic adventure game.
Yeah.
Why don't you walk through some of this gameplay stuff? Because you were talking to me about it earlier, and I could not believe it.
I can't believe it either, and I need to. This is one of those that I need to go back and play as an adult to kind of figure it out, like how to actually do it, because it is so. Of all the ways, like Pac-Man is one of these games that always mystifies me because, you think about what you want from a Pac-Man game. You want it to be sort of like arcadey. You want it to resemble the original in some ways, maybe add some layers to it, kind of like maybe like a Tetris effect kind of thing, but with Pac-Man.
Sure.
Like make it. Spice it up that way, but they did the weirdest things with this character to make these different games, and this has got to be the weirdest one. I mean, with this game, I just think of all the people that would have bought it because of Pac-Man, and then just being utterly mystified at what it even is. So it's kind of like a point-and-click adventure game. Pac-Man lives in some sort of town. He's like an anthropomorphic Pac-Man, so he's like living like a human being. Yeah. He's like living like a normal person in this town. And the game, he just walks from left to right like a side scroller through all these different screens of the town. And, he runs into cats and he runs into trees and there's people, selling. There's a hot dog vendor, there's a barn.
Right.
It's the strangest thing. And you don't actually control Pac-Man. That's another thing that's really weird is that you don't control him. He just kind of walks around. And what you do is you are the slingshot. So I don't know if you're Pac-Man slingshot or some other character, but basically you control like a target thing that moves around the screen and you shoot the slingshot. And I think you might shoot, I don't know if it's the pellets. I know that Pac-Man can get a pellet, and when he gets a pellet, he turns into like a superhero and flies around the screen. I remember that as a kid.
Sure.
But basically,
I mean, that's exactly what I imagined when playing the original arcade game. What he was doing.
Well, it's like someone wanted to be like someone way overthought this and was just like, what if Pac-Man was real? They just like wanted to make it like a piece of theater or something like that. But like me and my friends would always sit around and just try to figure this game out. And every time I'd be at my friend's house, be like, oh, I want to play that. They'd just be like, no, you don't want to play that. Like that's not going to go anywhere.
The look and feel of this game, Layne, it feels like somebody else picked up Namco's treasure and said, we're going to use this license to make some adventurous, way out of bounds type of game that you've never played before.
Right.
But the problem is that Namco made this game.
Yeah. 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 It feels like it doesn't. Yeah. It's like it's kind of like with, I think this way about Sonic sometimes too, where it's just like,
Sure.
just give us what we like about Sonic. You know, you don't need to do all these. And they do the same thing where they put Sonic in like the city and have him like coexist with other people and stuff.
Well,
But
we're
like,
not going to talk about Sonic 06
no,
probably on this podcast ever. Um, we're just going
no.
to leave that. We're going to leave that to the people that actually feel like they should play that for
Yeah.
whatever reason to try and get podcast downloads. We're not that desperate for downloads, Layne. So
No, okay, that's good.
we're
Well, no,
not gonna, we're not going
I
to talk at length about that game. I'm just throwing it out there.
that's fine. I legitimately want to, you and I and some other people, I want to sit down with this Pac-Man game and like as an adult and figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
like
No,
because
I mean,
yeah,
I'd play it. I'll give it a shot. I mean, there are games before that I've thought, man, maybe I wasn't good at this because I was a kid. And then I go back and play it, and I'm like, oh no, this is just not a game that you can beat.
no,
Um,
and yeah, and we just with us trying to figure it out, we just would torture Pac-Man because you can shoot the slingshot at him, and you can do stuff like you can shoot the cat with the slingshot, and then the cat attacks Pac-Man. And I think it's sort of like a puzzle thing. You're supposed to get, I don't even know, but we just figured you can put Pac-Man in all sorts of bad situations, and that's all we would do because we couldn't figure out how to actually progress in the game. So
right, which is kind of wild,
yeah,
because so what I do want to read one review here, and this is great because this is it's boomer trolling, but it's boomer trolling in 1994.
nice.
Which I didn't, I was 4 in '94. I was not aware of the term boomer, and I didn't even know people used the term boomer until probably the last few years.
Right.
But this is a review from Entertainment Weekly.
Nice.
Yes, Entertainment Weekly reviewed video games back in the day. And they gave the game a C minus.
Whoa, that's pretty high.
That's pretty high. Other publications have actually given it, 7 out of 10. So that's about like
Wow.
a C type rating. And that was for the Super Famicom version. That was a review from Japan. But Entertainment Weekly for the American release wrote, of course, there's nothing wrong with updating old boomer faves, but some games don't translate as well as others. The original Pac-Man, for instance, was wonderfully algebraic in its simplicity. An animated yellow dot scoots around a maze, gobbling up or running away from, pursuing ghosts. Pac-Man 2: The New Adventures is a Super Mario-type action game, which sounds very not
No,
true,
that's not true.
hampered by what Namco calls its character guidance interface, which is what you've spoken to. Players can't control Pac directly. It bothers me that they would shorten Pac-Man down to Pac, but
Also, that sentence, I love that sentence. They say it's a Mario game. Players can't control Pac directly. That's just
right.
amazing.
Same line of text here. Players can't control Pac directly. They influence his actions by calling attention to obstacles. Sound frustrating? It is. I needed a dozen tries just to figure out how to play this game.
And that's good to know because that's a grown person.
Yeah. Now this is a video game writer for Entertainment Weekly back in 1994. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like they gave it too high of a grade.
Oh my gosh.
Being at C minus. If a game takes you a dozen times to figure out how to play it, it better be really freaking good after you figure it out.
Yeah.
Like there's games that you can play that are frustrating, or maybe like, okay, think of a Dark Souls type game, right?
Right.
Super frustrating, borderline impossible sometimes if you don't know what you're doing. But you keep playing it, and then you eventually figure out what you're doing, and when that happens, it's very rewarding.
Right.
Pac-Man 2: The New Adventures, figuring it out after trying sounds like you still just get more bullshit that doesn't accomplish anything.
What they should do is when you figure out the screen where with the I love that that whatever that title is, like character directional interface or whatever.
Character guidance interface.
That's amazing. That makes me so happy. But every time you pass a screen with that, they should just let you play Pac-Man for like a half an hour.
So apparently there is a arcade in the game that you can visit, and when you go to the arcade, you have the ability to play the original Pac-Man. Now, there's a hidden difference between the Genesis and Super Nintendo versions, and this is a hidden difference that nobody will give a shit about, and that's if you collect 3 game cartridges around town, the arcade will allow you to play Miss Pac-Man in the Super Nintendo version and Pac Jr. in the Genesis version.
That's amazing.
Which begs the question, why?
Yeah. No, I really want to play that game and then just go to the arcade and play the original Pac-Man. Like once I figured that out, it would have been over. That's just
my greatest experience and my greatest memory of Pac-Man, and you may have a similar one, is when you used to be able to go and sit down and eat at a Pizza Hut with your family.
Yeah.
And you would sit there and you would pump quarters into the flat top Pac-Man game that had joysticks on either side.
Yep.
And you and your siblings would take turns, player 1, player 2, playing Pac-Man. That's my greatest memory of playing Pac-Man.
That's so good.
Anytime somebody like brings up any other Pac-Man thing, I just like, man, I just want to play with the stick and that's it. And like my son, he plays it on his tablet. Like he got super into. He saw Pac-Man on some YouTube video of some kid playing it, and he's like, "Oh, I want to play Pac-Man." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So we found some app for him to play, and it's hard to play on a tablet because you have to swipe your finger in which direction he goes, and nothing beats original Pac-Man.
No, there's a bar here in Tulsa that's like an arcade bar, and I think they have one of those tables there.
I'm sure I could probably find one around here too. It's just right now I don't know about touching joysticks after other mouth breathers have gone and it's decided that they were gonna pull their mask down so they could see Pac-Man better. You know what I mean?
No, definitely not. Yeah.
Because
yeah.
Because that could be a thing.
It could.
So we have one more game to get here, and I won't spend a whole lot of time on it. But when I'm going to throw a game out here, Layne, and we're talking about games that are so bad it's scary. And I think a lot of times expectations can drive that thought to you. Absolutely. If you expect a game that if you sit down to play a game and you expect to really enjoy it, like, oh, this is exactly what I've been waiting for. I played the last one in the series. The next one's going to be even better. And you sit down and you throw it in, and then you get into the nitty gritty of it, and you realize you actually hate this game, and you don't want to play it ever. And you go and you trade it into GameStop after 2 weeks just to try and get the full price refund of the $36 after spending $60. You're willing to take the loss at that point because you just want it out of your house.
This sounds like something that happened, like literally happened.
This literally happened to me with Monster Hunter World.
Oh, man.
Which is, of course, the Monster Hunter game that came out in 2018 on the PS4 and the Xbox One. I played it on PS4, as the way God intended. And I've played Monster Hunter games before, Layne. I've really enjoyed them. I've played similar games. I've played MMOs. I've played, because I know that the first criticism is like, well, you didn't play it enough, or you don't appreciate deep games. No, I do. But listen, I can only spend 8 hours killing the same monster over and over and over again with nothing that I'm doing affecting or changing it for so long.
Yeah.
And it's just so repetitive and so repetitive. And, I'm the guy that'll spend 12 hours in an RPG, a JRPG, straight leveling up and be like, man, that was a lot of fun. Like,
it's rewarding.
Because I'm seeing progress. instead of 3 turns, now the next time I level up with that same creature in that same area, it's only 2 turns. This doesn't do that, and it's very, very frustrating. And anytime that I would ask someone about it, I'd be like, "Hey, are you playing this? It's not any good, right?" Oh no, you just got to give it time.
Right, right.
And I feel like with Monster Hunter, that's all I have ever heard is, "Oh, you just got to give it time. You just got to keep going." And you know what? Time is precious.
Yeah.
You know, I don't. I'm not going to spend 70 hours to get a game started.
Yeah.
So for me, my last entry into the so bad it's scary category, yeah, I'm gonna say it. I'm just I you know people may not like it, people may hate it, people may not know it enough to have any opinion of that. But I feel like in the video game world, I'm holding a controversial opinion here, Layne.
That's good though. I like that. That's good for that's gonna get this. We're gonna go viral because of that. But no, so I agree. So I love and hate that game is what I'll say.
Sure.
Like I hated that game, and like when I was 10 hours in, I almost gave it up, and then like played a little bit more, and then I played it for like 100 more hours after that. But like I'm not super glad that I did. So I mean I know what you're saying, like because after 100 hours, so I can even attest to your experience. After 100 hours, I still felt like the game was just getting started. So
Yeah.
like when how far does it go? And one
And
the
why?
feeling, yeah, the feel right. Also, you feel like a jerk because you're like killing all these animals for no reason. Uh, but anyway, and the game doesn't give you a good reason to do it either. But like then it gives me the same feeling that Donkey Kong 64 gives me, which is like there's so much and it's so stressful, you know.
Yeah.
And like I actually started playing this other game that's like Monster Hunter World. It's called Dauntless, and it's like a million times better because it's like the same experience more or less, but progression happens really fast, and it's like amazing. So
And see that I feel like that for me, that would be like if you took Monster Hunter and you sped it up and
yeah.
made progression happen, I would love it.
Oh
I would
yeah, you should play
absolutely love it.
Yeah, you should play Dauntless.
And I might. You never know. But yeah, I mean, and we talked off recording before, but like, I mean, I've been playing Final Fantasy 14. I mentioned it on the podcast last week also. And it's been taking up a lot of my time, but progression feels real and it's
Oh yeah.
actually happening.
Hmm.
So, and I'm going on quests, and the quest makes sense in the story of the game. Whereas, like with Monster Hunter World, you're like, "Oh, we're on this island. Let's go
I
kill some
know.
monsters."
Yeah, seriously.
And
Yeah.
and I know I'm being overly critical probably, and that's fine. And I realize too now because I'm reading this that I'm being extremely critical over the game that has sold more copies for Capcom than any other game they've ever released.
That's
Um,
depressing.
right. So worldwide, it sold 15.5 million copies.
Wow.
Um, and then the expansion Iceborne, which I did not buy because I did not have the game anywhere near the time that expansion came out, um, which was, by the way, like almost 2 years later. Um, that expansion sold 5 million copies. So
Wow.
Capcom, I think it's safe to say, Layne, that Capcom will be releasing another Monster Hunter game, and I probably won't buy it.
Monster
So,
Hunter Universe, Monster Hunter Galaxy.
yeah, something, or who knows. But yeah, so and what's interesting, looking back at, I just wanted to look and see what the next closest game for Capcom sales were. You want to take a stab at it?
Resident Evil 4.
Resident Evil 4 is not even in the top 10.
What? Even if you count all the ports?
I don't know that it takes that into account.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
Um, but so the top 10 as of June 30th of this year, which is including digital distribution, which is important to note. Number 1, Monster Hunter World. Number 2, Resident Evil 7 Biohazard.
That's really weird.
Then Resident Evil 5.
Okay.
Then Resident Evil 6.
What?
which 5 and 6, and Sandy and I went into this at length. 5 and 6 are probably the worst games in the series.
Absolutely.
Um,
Easily.
but they also came out on two systems at the same time, so I think that probably helps their sales. The Resident Evil 2 remake is the fifth highest selling game, which I'll say that is an awesome
Is good.
remake.
That is good.
Street Fighter 2 is the first non-Resident Evil game and Monster Hunter game on this list. That sold 6.3 million copies on the Super Nintendo.
Wow.
Which, if you look at these other games, right? I mean, obviously distribution is better. You have digital distribution now. Street Fighter 2 got released 17 different ways with a million different titles.
Right.
So for the core Street Fighter 2 game to sell 6.3 million, I think that's pretty impressive. Being only on Super Nintendo. And then you have the expansion for Monster Hunter World next on the list.
Wow.
Then the original release of Resident Evil 2, Monster Hunter Freedom 3, which is on the PSP.
What?
And then Street Fighter 5 rounds out the top 10. So if you want to know why Capcom keeps making Monster Hunter and Resident Evil and Street Fighter, that would be why.
There you go. Wow. Mega Man, no Mega Man on that list. That's too bad.
No, and I want to have you back, Layne, when we eventually do a Mega Man episode, because there's nobody I know that knows Mega Man more. And Mega Man certainly probably has a few entries that could fit on this list that we're talking about today.
Definitely.
But we're not going to get into Mega Man 64 or anything like that.
That's a good game.
Well, I knew you were going to say that as soon as I mentioned that. This is our Mega Man 64 conversation. This is our Spider-Man 3 conversation. This is our which again not for this podcast. But we'll definitely have you on again to talk about Mega Man and the many iterations of that game series. But we talked a lot about bad games, Layne, and it's been a lot of fun. I think we've definitely had a good time talking about it, and definitely, if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I've played some of those games and they're not that bad, definitely tweet at us at 8-Bit Suplex. Let us know what you think of any of these games. But before I let you go, Layne, and then we'll get into after a brief commercial break. Well, myself and Dan Coffin or Sandy, we're recording this a little bit wonky. Either Sandy will be recording the Impact review with me, or Dan will. But before we go, it is Halloween. There are plenty of good games to play around Halloween. Give me one or two games here for the listeners to go and check out.
You got it. So I think my favorite probably would be Super Ghouls and Ghosts, which is one of the hardest games of all time, but it's just amazing. Another Capcom one, just amazing music, so much fun. Get a friend or two over and take turns just trying to beat it. It's it's a great one. Probably one of the best gameplay experiences I've ever had is me and just a buddy just not like refusing to leave until we beat that game, and it was a lot of pain and a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that game is one, by the way. You don't just beat the game once; you have to beat it twice in a row.
Yeah, and we actually didn't beat it that second time. So we counted the first one because that was a surprise to us in the moment. So
yeah, I mean, and also it is like you mentioned. I think you undersold how hard this game is.
I think I did. Yeah,
because you get 2 hits.
Yeah,
and then you start at the beginning.
Yeah. And the controls are like bad on purpose where your jumps are not like Mario. Once you go in one direction, you're going in that direction. So you have to plan ahead.
Right. Yeah. You can jump, and then your direction of your jump is set. And then if you do the double jump, you can change direction on the double jump. But once you do it, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Like you can't. Yeah. It's not like your typical side-scrolling platformer where you can jump and change directions midair, back and forth. You jump, you're going that way, much like you would in real life, quite frankly.
Right. Yeah. But it's a great game. I mean, one of my favorites ever. And then the other one on here, I was going to say Zombies Ate My Neighbors is another amazing one.
Great game, man.
Yeah, top-down, kind of game where you run around rescuing your neighbors and shooting zombies or throwing with squirt guns because you're just a bunch of neighborhood kids running around. But also great music, great game, perfect for Halloween.
Yeah, it really is, and surprisingly, that one was actually developed by LucasArts.
Oh, nice.
Um,
That makes sense.
yeah, which is it's kind of interesting because that was 1993, and we've go back in the archives. You can Sandy talked about point and click adventure games being her favorite genre as a kid, and LucasArts obviously being a huge part of that. But Zombie Ate My Neighbors, that's definitely a top-notch game out of them. And LucasArts, they published that with Konami. So
Nice.
the Konami logo is prevalent on the box, more
Mm.
prevalent so than LucasArts, but LucasArts developed the game and then also, published it as well. And then, I'm going to go with a more recent one. I mentioned it on the podcast last week as part of Epic Games' Halloween sale. But definitely, go out of your way to go and play Costume Quest. It's written by Tim Schafer. Tim Schafer obviously is a pretty well-known game developer or game designer. He was involved with a lot of those games that I mentioned before, with the Lucas Arts games, the point and click adventures. The biggest one being probably The Secret of Monkey Island, which I think everyone knows is kind of like the big one that really put him out there. But yeah, I mean, definitely go check out Costume Quest. It's an RPG. We love RPGs on this podcast. Layne and I
Oh, yeah.
we both play RPGs at length. So and this is a pretty short game if memory serves.
Oh, yeah.
So you could play through it on holiday or the holiday weekend here.
That is such a good idea. I mean, I want to play that game every year. It's one of my favorite games to get me in the spirit of things. It's just really fun, but also pretty deep little RPG. So it's a really good one.
Yeah, definitely go check that out. But yeah, definitely avoid those games we mentioned before and play those ones that we just mentioned now.
Yeah, you just
And
reminded me of Grim Fandango too. I mean, that's another really good Halloween one to play.
really good, really good. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many. Obviously, we talked about Resident Evil at the beginning of the month. Can't go wrong there. Layne, you're a bigger Silent Hill guy than I am.
Oh, I love that.
Um,
Yeah.
Definitely, check out stuff like that. Um, you know, Basically, pick up a horror game and play it. Obviously, if you're not one that wants to play it, but maybe you want to watch people play it, Phasmophobia is really huge on Twitch right now. I don't know if you're very familiar with that one at all, Layne. Um, but basically, you set up as a ghost hunter in a room, and you are basically you have to try and capture ghosts that are definitely going to try and kill you at some point.
Nice.
And it uses like voice recognition, so it's got some really cool things. But definitely, I haven't played it. I've only just seen clips of it. It's probably not one I'm going to play, just because you know I do sometimes turn into a little bit of a weenie with horror video games.
That's okay.
Not so much with horror movies, but definitely because I think I've seen enough horror movies. You see enough of them, you kind of it is what it is. I feel like with games you're more immersed, and so you can kind of it's you're focused on keeping your character alive, not necessarily on what's going on around you. And then next thing you know, something jumps out and grabs you. And so, um, you know, I, which kind of reminds me, I think Legends of the Hidden Temple could be a horror game if you really think about it.
Good.
Those temple guards, man,
Yeah.
never know if those guys are gonna pop out. But Layne, you got anything to promote? Anything you want to throw out there?
Not really. I mean, I'm just a grad student right now, getting coffee for all the professors, so I can promote the cup of coffee that I'm gonna bring to them. But that's pretty much.
You got any?
I'll
You got
let you
any?
know.
You got any good regional coffee places that people should check out in Tulsa?
Oh man, if you're in Tulsa, yeah, you got to check out. Let's see, man, there's a lot of good stuff. Chimera is a good place. Double Shot's a good place. Lots of good stuff. But yeah, if you come to, yeah, I'll show you around.
Yeah, come to Tulsa. Layne will show you around. But yeah, so everyone else, stick around after the short break. We'll be back with the Impact Wrestling review. And you know what, Layne, thanks a lot, bud. We'll see you next time.
All right, sounds good.
The 8-Book Suplex will be back after these messages.
Bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo Genesis.
free, Pat Riley free, Buster Douglas free, Super Monaco GP free, or Collins free. What Nintendo don't? Buy a 16-bit Genesis system between now and October 31st and get an extra game.
Hey everybody, it's Josh here. If the holidays are just around the corner, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that you can head on over to ProWrestlingTees/Social Suplex and pick up all your latest t-shirts from the Social Suplex Podcast Network, including the newest shirt to the bunch, which is our 8-Bit Suplex shirt. And, hey, Molly, how many stars do you think you'd give that t-shirt?
I give it 10.
Yeah, you know what? Me too. So anyways, head on over to the ProWrestlingTees.com/Social Suplex and buy all your loved ones Social Suplex Podcast Network shirt. And you know what? It helps the show. It helps you be a better friend and family member by giving a great gift that's super comfortable to wear around the house. So definitely make sure you go and do that.
And now, back to the show.
All right, and we're back from the commercial break. I hope you enjoyed it, whatever it is. I'm recording this with Dan Coffin, my fellow dad of the group. Episode 2 impromptu of Dad Pod here. We're recording this segment before I record whatever commercial I'm going to stick in the middle there, so I hope you enjoy it. And maybe Dan, I'll figure out what's kind of going to go in there by the end of this. But Dan, welcome back, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me back. This is kind of a last minute thing, I don't know. Hopefully Sandy's doing okay.
Yeah, Sandy has a sinus infection. She did test negative for COVID. So, don't sweat that. And that's especially good news for you and I, since we got together and watched Bound for Glory, which we're going to discuss here in a second. And Sandy was also a part of that. So she definitely made sure to go out of her way to make sure, because she was around my kids too, and just say, hey, listen, I'm sick, but I did get tested. You're good to go. Which I always appreciate, when people are considerate, Dan.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping she didn't pull a Kylie Ray on you.
Oh no! Well, we're not gonna get into that at all.
Well,
we
go over
might
that
a
later.
little bit. We might touch on it. We're not gonna throw out theories or anything.
Yeah,
Impact's still not said anything about it. As far as I know, the only thing I know is she wasn't injured physically, and she's still in good standing with the company. So whether and when we talk about this week's episode of Impact, there's a barrister. Yeah, that's right. I didn't. I said barrister. There's a barrister that makes a comment about it. That's it's kind of weird, and thankfully Scott D'Amore just kind of blows right past it. But yeah, so hopefully everything's okay in that regard. But what was more than okay was Bound for Glory 2020 here. If you're not a fan of Impact Wrestling, or you don't watch Impact Wrestling regularly, this is kind of like their WrestleMania. So, the card that gets everyone on the card. We got a huge Call Your Shot Gauntlet match with 20 wrestlers in it, and we'll get to that here shortly. But first, we have a 6-way scramble match for the Impact X Division Championship, of which, of course, has the defending Rohit Raju against Chris Bay, Jordan Grace, TJP, Trey Miguel, and Willie Mack. Dan, what'd you think of this one here?
It was okay. There was a lot of parts of it that were kind of like where they set up for spots, so everybody gets in their position and stuff, which it's kind of to be expected of something like this. It's kind of, all the moving parts trying to all mesh together at the same time. So there was a little bit of a standstill a couple of times, but other than that, it was entertaining. It was a good start to the show. Get everybody's juices flowing,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too that when you talk about 6-man matches, there's obviously spots that they want to do, and it's so hard to get to those spots without looking very inorganic, right?
Yeah.
sometimes they did it better than others. I
Right.
think there was one point TJP, of course, the great TJP, as we like to say here on this podcast,
Of course.
had a triple submission in
Yeah.
place where he had a submission on three different wrestlers, and then Jordan Grace was the one that actually broke it up. And actually, if we're talking about who looks good coming out of this match, there's, like you said, there's some really good spots here and there. Rohit Raju does kind of shit heel his way to a victory, stealing a pin. But I think other than of course Rohit looking good because he's still the champion, I think you really got to look to Jordan Grace looks pretty great in this match, mixing it up with the guys.
Right.
At one point she did pretty much from a tree of woe, did a double suplex to two guys on the top turnbuckle, which was impressive, and also got heat from Sabu.
Yeah, they had a little Twitter war this week. I saw.
Which, spoiler alert, I don't care what Sabu has to say about anything.
I don't know if even Sabu even knew what he was saying. Like I was shocked he had a Twitter. I thought he just lived in a van. I thought he was like the wrestler Mickey Rourke, just like living in a van in some random city and comes out once a week to do, knockdown, drag out matches in some gym somewhere.
And that might be the case, but he also might have a Twitter account with that. So
went to the library. And
okay, yeah, who knows? Yeah, exactly. He's sitting there at the public library in Des Moines, just sitting there cranking away. I just threw Des Moines out there, some random town. That was the first one that popped into my mind. Shout out to Des Moines. I guess I don't know. I've never been there. But yeah, I mean, good match. Like I said, Rohit Raju gets the victory. It doesn't really set us up for where he's going to go next. We don't know. And after this week's episode of Impact, we still really don't know what's happening with the X Division as we kind of start to, as we put Bound for Glory in the rear view, start to look ahead to Hard to Kill. We'll figure out probably in the next couple of weeks where that goes. But, something that sets up a automatic title match is the Call Your Shot Gauntlet match, and that was next. And, this is, like I said, 20 men and women in this match. You have Rhino entering in at number 1 because he lost the stipulation match last week to Hernandez, who was able to come in at number 20 because he pinned Rhino after he gored Alicia Edwards. But we see Alicia Edwards in this match, so good to see her rebounding some and, not permanently injured. But joining them, we have AC Romero, Adam Thornstowe, Brian Myers, Crazy Steve, a returning Daivari, who looked unbelievably ripped.
Jacked, man. That guy's been living in the gym during quarantine or something.
Yeah, he's a body guy, huh? Oof.
Now he is, yeah. Guy looked like an action figure walking out there.
I didn't have action figures with 10-packs, Dan. They stopped at 8 when I was a kid. Follow Bob was in this match, the opposite of a body guy. We see Havoc come to the ring, accompanied by Nevaeh. Heath, of course, is in this match too. And we have a returning James Storm, which that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, it's nice to have somebody come back that you weren't quite expecting to show up. And he's been over at NWA, right?
That's correct, but he's recently gone from there, I believe. So maybe he's back at Impact. That'd be cool to see. You want to talk about another guy that's unbelievably jacked? That's another one.
Yeah. He's got a history with Impact too, so
yes, he does.
Like some crazy person coming out of nowhere. So
right, exactly. Former tag champs, and I think he also at one point was a TNA heavyweight champion. But don't quote me on that. And then of course we also have Kiera Hogan, who is accompanied by Tasha Steelz. We have Larry D, because of course we had AC earlier. Lust of the Legend, because we had Thornstowe earlier. And then of course Sami Callihan gets in there. And then we have a surprise appearance by none other than Swoggle.
Right. It's crazy to see a McMahon on the TV for Impact, right?
Yeah, that was pretty funny stuff. And we'll get into kind of how he gets eliminated here. But we also have Tay Valkyrie and Tennille Dashwood. And, of course, my best friend and yours, who he has actually sent me a message on Twitter, Mr. Tommy Dreamer.
Right.
And Tommy Dreamer, of course, come out to the ring with his Road Warrior animal paint on, and kind of did his hair like him to honor his late friend. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a nice little moment to see him come out like that.
Yep, it was, and he was wearing a special Road Warrior shirt. So if you if you want to support Road Warrior Animal shirt, you can actually go and buy that shirt. I think it's on Pro Wrestling Tees. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'll make sure I put the link in the show notes. All the proceeds go to Animal's family, so that's pretty cool.
Nice.
Tommy Dreamer proves to be a stand-up guy time in and time out, so good on him for promoting that. But this match oftentimes was a mess, and I think Brian Myers winds up with the most eliminations with 6.
Yeah, he went on a run there at the beginning. He was going Roman Reigns, Kane style, just like plowing through dudes.
I think at one point I said, man, they booked him like Big Show Rumble style, where gets the most eliminations and doesn't even come close to winning this thing.
Right.
But of course, we whittled this down to the last 2. Now, I will point out Heath came out pretty late, like 18 or so, I think it was.
Right. Yeah, it was something like that. He was near the end there.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he threw a lariat, and immediately Logan, who is Sandy's boyfriend, also a wrestler, so check out Tampa Bay Pro Wrestling and some other stuff that he's in. He immediately goes, "Oh, Heath's hurt." I'm like, "What?" Like he caught it before I think anyone else in the room did.
Yeah, I didn't even notice.
And then next thing you know, Heath's trying to take a step and he can't. And then I noticed he started grabbing at his side, and at first I think everyone kind of thought like maybe it was his knee or his ankle or something. And I said, "Oh man, I think that's a hernia." And that's actually what it wound up being. And I can't imagine.
It was really rough to watch. Because it wasn't like he got hurt and they got him out of there real quick and like, oh, change of plans, in like 30 seconds or something. He was like wincing in pain and rolling around, and you could see
walking along the ropes.
John Callis and the referee were like over on the side talking, like they caught him in the shot, and it was just really uncomfortable to watch the whole thing.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out too. This is a live pay-per-view. They didn't pre-tape this.
Right.
And because of that, they literally changed it on the fly. And of course, we know that Don Callis is, producing it and is probably the one that booked that match.
Right.
So tough to have your booker on commentary. But Josh Matthews is the consummate professional and was able to step in and kind of carry the load there. But eventually he does get eliminated. And it is by Sami Callihan, which leaves us. I know. Of course, I think he only screamed thumbs up, thumbs down twice at Bound for Glory. So that's I think that hits the under. But at the end there, we get the one-on-one match because, as we know, the gauntlet matches at Impact. So they start off Battle Royal style, and then the last 2 it becomes a one-on-one match.
Right.
A little bit messy here. They obviously had to audible. This was clearly set up for Heath to win to get his Impact contract.
Right. The stipulations before the match like laid it out pretty much. We all kind of thought what was going to happen. The way they were going, and then he's hernia had other plans.
Yeah, so. His hernia didn't follow the script, Dan.
Right.
So, we get Rhino in the final match, and I feel like because there was a lot of talking between the officials and the wrestlers in the ring, this feels like it was supposed to be Heath and Rhino at the end, with Heath screwing over Rhino to get his thing, not knowing that Rhino put his own contract on the line to give Heath the shot. That would have been a great booking, but unfortunately we couldn't get there. So Rhino hits Sami Callihan with the gore and picks up the victory. And now Rhino is the holder of the Call Your Shot trophy, which I'll be honest, and I'm a little upset about this. It's a little bit nicer than Toru Yano's King of Pro Wrestling trophy. Um, Listen, man. You know what? Toru Yano deserves better. That's what I'm getting at.
You're gonna die alone on that hill, buddy.
Yeah, I know. I know. I know. Oh well, it
I
is what
thought
it
they
is.
recovered well. I mean, they called the audible, and it completely threw them for a loop, and you could see like just the anxiety and like, oh shit, what are we gonna do now, right? But I feel like
Right.
they recovered well. Rhino's a pro; he can step in and take care
He
of it.
is,
And
and
it
he
looked
was
like,
clearly gassed. By the way,
yeah,
he was clearly out of it.
and maybe Sammy wasn't planning on being in there, but you just by watching him and Rhino, you couldn't really tell that he was like flummoxed or anything. So
Yeah, I
they
think
recovered pretty well.
he hit Rhino with a pretty good side by side slam if I remember, or a backdrop slam, something like that. And yeah, I mean the singles matches at the end of those things never go that long.
Right.
I think according to Cage Match it went a minute 45, which is about what they. I mean, at that point you can make the case that both competitors are, you
Right.
know, eternally tired
Reach
from
their
the fact.
limits.
I mean, Rhino works this entire thing, which is 25 minutes and 27 seconds,
Yeah.
which is probably 20 minutes longer than his next longest match this year. So, hey, shout out to Rhino for the victory. And we'll see if they do the tag titles when Heath is better or if Rhino decides not to wait for Heath. It'll be interesting to see which way they go there. But next on the card here, and this was one where we kind of didn't know what was going to happen, how it was going to look, because it was our cinematic match, and that would be, of course, Moose, the self-proclaimed TNA World Heavyweight Champion, which is, of course, not a belt recognized by Impact, taking on EC3 in an undisclosed location. Impact has a history of doing these types of things, and I don't think this was bad. But I don't necessarily think it was good either. It was confusing. Um,
Well, glowing praise from your host, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah, totally confusing, raves Josh McLaughlin.
Don't think they're putting that on the DVD cover. Yeah, it was just weird. I don't know. It seemed like with the people standing outside. I hate to bring WWE into this because we like focus on Impact, but it just had a lot of. It reminded me a lot of the Retribution crap, and also the WWE Underground, which is apparently not anymore. But now maybe they came up with the idea for all this. Like EC3, I think said somewhere on Twitter or an interview or something that he had come up with the idea for WWE Underground, right? And they stole
Right.
it from him. So maybe that's where this stuff came from. Like he had these ideas before that it was even a thing on the other brand. But because it came second, unfortunately, it just kind of looked derivative and not great.
Right. He's getting compared to Underground versus Underground getting compared to him.
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
we
you got
both
the shitty end of the stick here.
he did, and because honestly it's better than the production on Underground.
Oh yes.
And of course, our beloved co-host Sandy, her appearance on Underground notwithstanding,
Right.
the camera cuts, the Shane McMahon of it all, not great. It's like
Right.
it's like, hey Shane, here snort some Adderall and go out there, bud. Like
Right.
but yeah, I mean, we see some. It was a really weird ring setup. Like there's random turnbuckle pads missing. EC3 gets busted open, which of course Moose is wearing all white. So that blood's just showing everywhere that EC3's face goes.
It seemed almost like a dream sequence more than a cinematic match, just with like
Yeah.
the randomness of the turnbuckles being gone and him wearing white, and you knew he was going to bleed because why else would a wrestler wear white, right?
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
So it just seemed like, and the fact that it was cinematic, whereas the rest of the show was live, it just seemed like maybe this was like in somebody's head or something like that.
Yeah, and that
It's
that
unsanctioned too, so.
right, exactly. And Scott D'Amore, as we've mentioned in past episodes, he hasn't actually. Scott D'Amore has not acknowledged that EC3 works at Impact, and is called Moose crazy for chasing after a guy that doesn't work there for a
Right.
title that he never won. So it very well could be just something that Moose is just he's just maybe going crazy. Um,
hmm
he's literally talking to EC3 projected on the wall at times. So, it sets up Moose kind of being crazy on this week's episode of Impact, and we'll get into that later. But of course, Moose does defeat EC3 to the point where it looks like he's killed him. And and of course, the EC3 acolytes carry EC3 out.
Yeah. It's odd.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, I wish I could explain it better, but I really can't because that's pretty much what it was.
Yeah.
So next on here, and I know you're just waiting and dying to talk about this one, Dan, is the most dangerous man in the world, Ken Shamrock, accompanied to the ring, of course, by Sami Callihan, against the Pride of Boston in Impact, at least, Mr. Eddie Edwards. This is a match that in the lead up I said it won't matter. That's a quote I said to Sandy. I said to Sandy, Sandy, who do you think wins this one, and why does it matter? And we both predicted Ken Shamrock, and we both said it wouldn't matter. And truthfully, it really did not seem like it did. It was interesting is that the Observer does review Impact pay-per-view matches, and the Observer gave this match a 1.5 stars. It goes 12.5 minutes, and Ken Shamrock does defeat Eddie Edwards. We try to stay positive here, Dan. I don't want to dwell on the negative, which is basically the entire match. But I will say we got a really cool moment in the pre-show with Ken Shamrock being inducted into the Impact Hall of Fame.
Right.
And I mean, it was a star-studded affair as far as the wrestling world is concerned.
I mean, that's basically why they had this match on the show, was so they could do the Hall of Fame. And I wouldn't say it was an induction ceremony, really. They just kind of like brought him out and didn't even like zoom in on him when he was talking. They just kind of handed him a little thing and said, here you go. But yeah, they had quite a cavalcade of wrestlers, past and present and celebrities. So,
and of course, he was most popular probably during the Attitude Era.
Right.
So anybody that he worked was pretty much available, I think, for him to send in, especially since because of COVID restrictions, it would all be video congratulatory statements. So it kicked off with Bret Hart, which was I hadn't heard about that ahead of time.
No, that was a surprise.
That was a pretty cool one too. He actually, I think, gave the longest video. Of course, Mick Foley sent in a video as well. And Mick buries the lead and says he's only the second coolest member of the Rock and Sock Connection to be a part of the ceremony. And something I never thought I'd see in a million years was Dwayne Johnson, a.k.a. The Rock, being on a Impact Wrestling pay-per-view to congratulate his friend Ken Shamrock. On a scale of 10 to like 300, how pissed off is Vince McMahon that Dwayne Johnson potentially popped a rating for Impact?
I don't know if he even knows Impact exists. I mean, it's Vince, so he's probably not too pissed off. I'm sure he heard something about it. Probably not too worried about it. Couple of things about it I thought were interesting was they didn't call him Dwayne Johnson. They called him The Rock.
They did.
Isn't that like a trademarked name for WWE, you would think? Or maybe, I don't know if Dwayne owns it now. I'm not sure how all the legalities on that.
Yeah, I don't know if Dwayne has it now. But yeah,
I mean, he owns the XFL now. He might as well buy the trademark to The Rock too.
I think that it looks like okay. So Dwayne Johnson does now own the right to the name The Rock. I just Googled it. Thank you to the Google machine. It was, of course, formerly owned by Vince McMahon and the WWE. And so any movie that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was in, Vince McMahon actually got executive producer credits for because he owned the character.
Of course he did, right?
So there's
The
your
precursor of owning their Twitch and Cameo and everything, right?
right. There's the
So
late '90s version of that. And now you know more about the naming rights. So, but yeah, I guess since Dwayne owns it, it's a fair game. But it still is kind of a stunning thing.
It's a huge deal. I mean, and
Yeah.
nobody ever thought that would happen. I mean, The Rock's never really been anywhere else, right? He's been born and bred, WWE. So that was surprising.
It's extremely surprising, especially given that his daughter currently works for
Yeah.
WWE in the training center. Maybe or in the performance center. Let me make sure I get that name right so I don't get any papers. But it must be. He's got to know something about maybe how far Simone's going to wind up going in there, or maybe she's. I can't imagine that he would do anything that would jeopardize what she wants to accomplish. So I don't think that this means we're going to see Dwayne Johnson on TNT, right? But doing a thing for his buddy and getting a free plug for his tequila brand, I think
Of course.
and he clearly had he still had his nice shirt on and was in his backyard still from the Joe Biden endorsement video.
Yeah, that was the other thing I thought was pretty hilarious. Is like he filmed one of those immediately after the other because he was wearing the same shirt. It was the same camera angle. It's
Yep.
like same time of day. It was pretty funny on that.
It was pretty funny, but you know what? And it was the only one that looked like it was shot professionally. The other videos
yeah.
were all very much iPhone videos, like selfie videos.
I mean, would you be surprised if Impact paid for cameos just to get those for Ken? I mean,
I feel like they would have. I feel like Brett would have probably declined it. Mick wouldn't. I think Mick would be like, "Oh, I got a cameo, cool." And then he'd be like, "Oh, for Ken Shamrock, of course." And then I'm sure Brett probably called and was like, "Dude, you gotta pay my rate, dude. Like, what are you doing? This is a professional appearance." So, but yeah, I mean, we spent enough time, I think, talking about Ken Shamrock. Maybe one day when he hangs up the boots, hopefully soon, we'll talk more about maybe some of the historical, pretty good. He's had some good matches in the past, but I think those are pretty much all like 25 years ago at this point almost.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'd rather be talking about him in the Hall of Fame and some of his older matches than this match right here. I mean, this was just.
We did a great job avoiding this match. So
it was not great.
I think
12 minutes. I mean, come on. It should have been 2.
I think we've avoided it enough that we said that we covered it, so we can move on to the 4-way Impact World Tag Team title match. This one, the Observer gives 3 stars, so pretty good rating there from Dave and the gang.
Yeah, not bad.
14 and a half minutes. We have the defending Motor City Machine Guns against the Good Brothers, Doc Gallows and Carl Anderson. The North, Ethan Page and Josh Alexander. And, of course, the tag team of Ace Austin and Madman Fulton. Now, at the start of this, during the entrances, Josh Alexander takes Alex Shelley and gives him what we all cringed on the couch watching this, a brutal pile driver at the top of the ramp.
This show loves pile drivers, don't they?
They do. I mean, listen, outside of WWE, you're going to get a lot of pile drivers. I will say that, AEW more so does the Canadian Destroyer style, kind of thing. Maybe a little too much. But pile drivers is that's the most brutal move you can do in Impact canon, I think.
It's
and
pretty
really,
brutal. I mean,
it is a brutal move.
Them.
It is a brutal move. And the way that Shelley acted on Twitter afterwards, because he was removed from this match, it was very hard to tell at first if it was a work or a shoot. But Shelley seemed to say that he was he legitimately couldn't feel anything in his hand at first. So, but we all know workers love to work and fans love to get worked. So maybe I'm believing that too much. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. Maybe I am. But listen, I mean, we both saw the.
I mean,
impact,
maybe they
so
had
to
a pile
speak, of that
driver at
pile
the
driver.
beginning, and they nailed it pretty good. It could be
Right.
both.
It could be either way. So, but needless to say, Chris Sabin works his ass off in this match, spends the majority of the time in the ring as the single wrestler without a tag partner. But ultimately, at the end, the North winds up pinning Carl Anderson, which I thought was an interesting decision also, because we have not seen the Good Brothers lose, period.
Right.
But yeah, Carl Anderson, I believe he gets hit in the face with one of the titles and gets rolled up, and that's all she wrote. But you know what? Pretty good match here. Like I said, the Observer gave it 3 stars. It's about a 7 right now on Cage Match, so people really like that match. And
That's
I'll be
good.
honest, if the main event didn't happen, this might have been the match of the night.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, it didn't overstay its welcome. I was really surprised that Saban had to do it alone because
Yeah.
most of the machine guns are great workers. But yeah, it was pretty good. We didn't have to watch Doc Gallows too much, so that's not bad. But like we were talking about when we were watching the show here, we also watched New Japan. So
Right.
I didn't know, like we had talked about, like if the Good Brothers lose, could they possibly be in a World Tag League? So I don't know. We'll see, right? I mean, they didn't win the titles, so they're not going to
No,
be on
and
Impact as
and
much.
they
But
they were backstage on this week's Impact in a backstage clip and a little brawl. But I mean, they could have easily taped that. I mean, they taped it already, like
right,
way in advance. So who knows how much is taped for after Bound for Glory? I imagine they didn't get very far um, because of what happened with this next match, which feels like a pretty hot shot audible that they had to call. Um, like we mentioned at the top, Kylie Ray does not appear here for her challenge to Deonna Purrazzo. It's been pretty well documented that Kylie Ray in the past has had some mental health complications and some things, and we definitely want to be sensitive to that. We definitely hope that she's okay first and foremost, because she's not said anything on social media. Nobody seems to
right.
know what the full story is. The Observer doesn't know. Sean Ross doesn't know. So we're all just kind of waiting to hear what exactly happened, and we may never know what exactly happened. And if it is a personal issue, it's not really for us to know about, right? So hopefully everything is okay with her. But for the match itself, Deonna Purrazzo is introduced first. Then Kylie Ray's music hits. Nobody comes out. Deonna makes a comment like, "See, she's not been here all day. But you know what? I'm the virtuoso. I'm gonna defend this title against any man, woman, anything." And I keyed in when she said anything,
Right.
because at that point I was like, because I was thinking, okay, who's she gonna defend against now? Because she's out the ring. She's gonna. And then when she said anything, that tipped me off in my head. I was like, oh, we're getting Su Yung now.
Right.
And enter Su Yung, who is a pretty creepy character, Dan. I'm not gonna lie. Not too many characters that try to go for that creepster kind of monster, devilish kind of look. Pull it off quite the way that Su Yung does here.
Yeah, she moves pretty demonically. She I wouldn't want to like see her out in like a graveyard or anything, right?
Sure, exactly. Or at the set of Halloween Havoc this week on NXT.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
uh,
She could give Shotzi a run for her money out there, right?
well, Shotzi, was looking great out there. Did a good job hosting that show. Maybe at some point, Sandy and I, discussed maybe doing like a special quick Halloween special review. Maybe you'll see that. Maybe you won't. If you do see it, look for it. If you don't see it, too bad.
Okay.
Them's the breaks. Hey, listen, the card's always subject to change, Dan.
That's right.
And
As
that's what we
we've
learned
seen
with this
throughout the
match
show,
too.
right?
Right. So, Su Yung comes out. It's a pretty good match. I liked it a little bit better than the Observer did. The Observer gives it 2 stars. The match goes 15
Yeah,
minutes, 5
it
seconds.
was better than that.
It was better than 2, I thought. And I think that unfortunately, the rating goes based off of the fact that it was supposed to be Kylie Ray in the match.
Right.
And we were all pretty, juiced up for that and ready to go. And I think Su Yung stepped into a really difficult space And she did great. I thought the match was really good. The mandible claw with the bloody lace glove. I mean,
Nice.
listen,
Always a nice touch.
listen. If you do a mandible claw, but it's just your bare hand, okay, that's pretty brutal, right? I can understand that. But you do it like, it's not Mr. Sacco level of gross. But a bloody
No,
lace glove.
I mean it's up there.
It's pretty close. It's pretty close.
6 of one, half dozen of the other on that.
Right, exactly. And I will say, shout outs to Dr. Britt Baker for using a latex glove like a true dentist would, for when she does her mandible claw variation. But yeah, Su Yung, winds up getting the victory here on Deonna Purrazzo. And you know what? I really enjoyed the match. Hopefully, we'll see kind of where the story goes. We've been speculating that Su Yung was coming for a while. They've been talking about it. Madison Rayne has been talking about it on commentary for like 6 weeks.
Right.
That Susie's starting to, that was something that Su Yung would have done. Oh, that's Su Young's move. So, we thought it was going to come. It probably came a little early.
It seems like they pulled the trigger on this, like, just out of necessity. But it seemed to work out, right?
Yeah, it did. I think it did. And they've, they have a kind of a goofball angle to get to the rematch for this title with this week's episode of Impact, and we'll get into that with the barrister, and that whole ordeal is just kind of nuts. But this is a good match. It stands on its own. It's a pretty. I mean, you want to talk about good, women's matches. This one's up there. I think definitely if you enjoy women's wrestling, this is a match for you to watch. But that leaves us with one match here on our Bound for Glory review, Dan. And that is the Impact World Title match between the defending Eric Young and the challenger who's overcome all odds to get to this match, one Rich Swann, who threw us all for a loop because he decided to shave off all of his facial hair.
Looks like a totally different guy.
I literally had to double take because I've been watching Rich Swann probably since the Cruiserweight Classic, that time frame,
like 3 or 4 years.
3 or 4 years, pretty closely, and I was just completely blown away by how different the man looked. He looked like 10 years younger.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, I guess if you want to be the baby face in the match, you better have that baby face cooking, right?
Exactly.
So, I thought this match was really good. It was worthy of the main event, certainly. It goes 21 minutes, 31 seconds. The Observer gives it 3.5 stars, which is a pretty good rating out of them for an Impact match, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Rich Swann overcomes the odds again and beats Eric Young.
Yeah, it was a pretty good match. I mean, I'll say this about it. I feel like it saved the whole show for me, right?
Yeah.
The show before this, it had some ups, a lot of downs. They were having production issues all night, which we hadn't really mentioned before too. So it was like, to compare it to another company again, when we went to see All Out, right?
Yeah.
It was like that show just felt cursed to us from like the beginning of the show, and like just things kept going wrong, and it seemed like we were on that path with this show too, but they pulled the nose up at the end, I think. And this match, it started out a little slow, but it built up. It was almost like a kind of a New Japan style match to me, where they built it up, and then at the end they were just going for it, right? And then a great ending, and we got a new champion out of it.
Yeah, and I had thought maybe they didn't do the title switch here, just because there's no crowd to cheer for the babyface. But they did a good job with the locker room coming out and hoisting Rich up. And I will point out, you mentioned the production issues. Right at the start of the show, they had started rolling the intro package, and then they didn't like what it looked like, I guess. And then they paused it. Like, you actually saw a mouse cursor come up and pause the video, rewind it, and then push play again at the start of the pre-show. So I don't know if the problem was with access. I don't know if it was with the studio in the Impact Zone. There's a story going around that the French language broadcast had to get scrapped last minute. even though the French announcers were there, they couldn't broadcast it properly. The sound wasn't
Hadn't heard that.
working. Yeah, so tons of production issues. But overall the show is good. I think we at the time before the main event we were saying this is kind of like a pretty good episode of Impact, with some good matches and not a lot of backstage stuff. And then this match definitely was a pay-per-view worthy match, for sure.
Right.
Eric Young busted out that middle rope wheelbarrow neck breaker, which, yeah, if what I'm describing doesn't make sense to you, it doesn't make sense by words. You just have to go and watch it because it's pretty insane.
I'd
And
never seen anything like that.
I hadn't either. So kudos to those guys for, as you said, pulling the nose up. And it's kind of fitting that we end Bound for Glory with those two guys, and then we pick up immediately with this week's Impact with Eric Young and Rich Swann going at it again backstage. Of course, Rich Swann is dressed, to celebrate. He's in his, his dress clothes, his slacks, his boat shoes. He's just kind of chilling. Eric Young is full gear, just ripping into him backstage. Eventually, the brawling gets out to the ring, and the brawling goes on for a very long time before security and Scott D'Amore and everyone come out.
It was a
and
little
even,
lax on the security on that, but
it was funny. But even Josh Matthews was like, "Is somebody coming out here?" Like, and then he's like, "Oh, finally, Scott D'Amore and the security staff are out here." Like, Josh Matthews always does, I think, a pretty funny job of kind of pointing out the kind of the silliness of what's going on the screen.
Right.
But Eric Young is screaming about his rematch. Scott D'Amore is like, "No, you don't get your rematch this way. This isn't how it's done. You got to do it the right way. You got to actually get it booked." And then Rich says, "You know what? No, let's do this thing." So Rich Swann, in slacks and bare feet, agrees to let Eric Young cash in on his rematch clause. And you know what? I like this match a lot too.
Yeah, I mean it was short.
It was.
It was like 3 minutes or something like that. This is a quick, hard-hitting match. Yeah, it is another match where it made me want to see them continue their feud and see another match with them possibly down the road.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see because I agree with you. I don't think that they're going to be done with this feud, just because there doesn't really seem anywhere else for Eric Young to go right now. And he's been so good for them during this period since Slammiversary. I can't see them just, cooling him off TV. It just doesn't make sense.
I think this will go to Hard to Kill. Maybe they'll have another match there.
Yeah, they'll probably have some kind of no DQ, stick to the Hard to Kill theme, something like that.
Up the stakes, yeah.
We do see Rich Swann backstage throughout this episode, interacting with different talent. He at one point runs into Moose. Moose says that Rich is only second best, of course, because he's the TNA World Heavyweight Champion and Rich is only the Impact Champion. And I think
this man's out of his mind. What is he doing?
He is really out of his gourd. And I think there's someone else that Rich talks to backstage. I can't think of it, but I do want to point out that Rich Swann in slacks and no shoes did, for his finisher, do a second rope Phoenix Splash.
He did. I was watching
insane.
that. I was like, is he going to go to the third rope? No, he's doing it off the second rope. What is it? He's nuts. I mean, but he still nailed it. So.
He nailed it.
Good for him.
It might even be better than Rich Swann in full gear from the third rope.
Yeah.
But, neither one of us trains, so I don't know how much more stable the second rope is than the third rope for jumping purposes.
Right.
Maybe he just figured if I'm going to slip, it's going to be not as far from the second rope. That's kind of how I thought.
That might have been it, like not as much elevation.
But yeah. Anyways,
we'll have to check with Josh #1 on that, his expertise.
Well, we might check with Sandy. Sandy's been at this a little bit longer, I think, than Josh #1.
Yeah.
And then and certainly we can ask Logan. Logan does do some jumping from the turnbuckles, and Logan has actually got like 100 matches under his belt already. So and he's not been doing it a long time. So like I said, I mentioned it earlier, but keep your eyes on Logan Cruz. he was supposed to have a match with a major promotion, and then it wound up getting scrapped because of COVID. So that's very unfortunate.
Yep.
And not from him. I want to point that out. He wasn't the one that caused the scrap. So next up on the docket here, we have Brian Myers versus Tommy Dreamer in the hardcore Halloween match. And this match I thought was a lot of fun.
I did too. I enjoyed it. I mean, it was. They pulled out some crazy stuff. Like, I laughed out loud when Tommy hit Brian with the ring bell in his crotch.
Yes.
I'm a sucker for stuff like that.
And the best part about that is that would literally do nothing. Like
Right.
to put the ring bell, the wooden part of the ring bell, up against the crotch and then ring the bell. It's
Makes
a silly
funny noise.
It's a silly
so
spot.
It's entertaining.
And it's Tommy. Listen, Tommy is, anytime you put Tommy out there with unlimited weapons, he is of course the innovator of violence.
Exactly.
And he's going to innovate, right? The ring bell spot was pretty funny. He had the trash can out ringside, and Brian Myers at one point tries to pick up the trash can, which has a walker on top of it, and he can't pick it up. And the whole time I was racking my brain. I was like, what the hell is in that trash can that they're trying to sell? Like, is it like bricks? Is it like, what is it, right? Like, and obviously he's selling that he can't, but he will obviously pick it up. But I couldn't figure it out. And of course, after he can't pick it up, Tommy Dreamer, gets him off of it and then pretends to walk with the walker, like, oh, you think I'm an old man, huh? And he just whacks the shit out of him with that walker.
It was great.
It really was. And then, of course, and this was the scariest part of the match for me, he takes a bag of candy corn and thumbtacks. I'm more worried about the candy corn, Dan, than the thumbtacks for Tommy Dreamer, just because maybe I'm in the minority, but candy corn is absolutely disgusting.
I'm not a fan. I don't like candy corn, but I also don't like thumbtacks either. So.
That's a fair point. A fair point. So, of course, because it's Tommy Dreamer, because it's a hardcore match, there's going to be thumbtacks. I've told Tommy before, man, hey, lay off the thumbtacks, will ya? I don't need to see that anymore. And he said, well, I don't need to see it anymore either. And yet he still does it time and time again. So, Tommy, once again, man, hear my plea. No more thumbtacks. Please. I know you weren't the one that took the bad bump in it, but please, no more thumbtacks. But as I mentioned, at one point, Tommy goes up on the turnbuckle to attempt to do something. Brian Myers slips away, climbs up on the turnbuckle, starts hitting him. Tommy counters by biting him in the forehead, and more of a gnawing kind of motion.
Did you ever play the 8-bit Nintendo game, Pro Wrestling? There was the fish man that would bite your face. That's what it reminded me of.
Well, I mean, if anyone on the Impact roster could be called a fish man, I think it'd probably be Tommy Dreamer. Yeah, he just, I mean, as a joke, but also literally, he looks like he'd be one of those guys out of Pike's Place Market, fish market in Seattle, just catching fish and throwing them at each other, right? I mean, I don't know. That feels like a Tommy Dreamer kind of job. But he does the bite, the gnaw, and then he goes bye-bye, and he just shoves Brian Myers, falling back like he shot out of a cannon, just with a two-hand shove, and he lands flat back on the candy corn and thumbtacks. And he picks up 1 million of these things, Dan.
Yeah, it looked rough. I don't know how you learn to do something like that, man. If I get one thumbtack and stick it in my thumb on accident, I'm running around like a baby.
You make it a literal thumbtack, right? And then that's that. Yeah, sharp metal objects. I don't really want any part of that. And what's crazy too is, and I've always thought this too when you talk about for pro wrestling thumbtacks, the referee still has to count 3 on that mat.
Yeah, that was the one thing I noticed. He was just smacking right in the middle of that. I was like, he's gonna just impale his hand with these tacks, and
he was going with a full hard 3 count there, Dan.
Crazy.
I'm like, man, what happens if he hits his hand on a thumbtack and it sticks? He's not going to be able to continue. He's going to go in the middle of it, right? Like, I guess
keep
we could make
counting.
that part of an angle of the match, right? But I mean, Brian Myers does eventually wind up losing. So nice to see Tommy Dreamer get off the schneid here. He's lost a few matches in a row. But, hey, you give Tommy Dreamer 10 minutes, 11 minutes here, 43 seconds, to come up with some violence.
You did
And
have some help, though. You
he did.
failed to
I
mention what
did.
was in the trash can.
I completely forgot. And this is a callback to Bound for Glory, because we mentioned Swoggle did come into the gauntlet match at Bound for Glory. He and Brian Myers, of course, are really good friends. Historically, they go way back. Brian Myers uses his help to eliminate. Who is it that he eliminated? Was it Davari? I believe it was Davari he eliminated with
so.
the help of Swoggle.
He needed some help with Davari. That man was a tank.
He was. I mean, I know it sounds like we're swooning over the guy, but really, the guy was absolutely jacked.
Ripped, good for him.
Yeah. Anyways, back to that. So then Brian Myers has Swoggle seated on like the top rope after getting his help eliminating Davari, and then he just kind of says, "Hey man, good to see you." He's like, "Oh yeah, man, good to see you too." And he just shoves him off into the arms of Davari to the outside, eliminating Swoggle. Very rude, very heelish.
Unprofessional,
Right. For the most professional wrestler, Brian Myers, to be so unprofessional, it's just horrible. But then, fast forward to Tuesday night, in the finish of this match, we find out what is in the trash can, and it is actually, of course, none other than Swoggle, who comes out and helps Tommy Dreamer by taking salad tongs and squeezing Brian Myers' giblets with it.
One does with your salad tongs, right?
I mean, what else would you do, right? And I will say, when he did it, I legitimately laughed out loud, just at the pure nonsense of it.
Right. It was completely expected when you saw the salad tongs and you saw Swoggle what was going to happen, but sometimes the expected thing, when it happens, it's the best, right?
Right, exactly. And I mean, if you've watched Swoggle at all over the years, you know that he is a great height for low blows, because for him, they're pretty much straight blows. And so they definitely use that here and get Tommy Dreamer the win. And hey, listen, no DQ is no DQ. You know what I mean? Moving right along. Yeah,
we had the tag match.
We had the tag match next. I was trying to think if there was anything to talk about backstage. There's a lot of this episode has the wedding of Rosemary and Johnny Bravo, and we'll talk a decent amount about that, because that's kind of pretty much, we're almost done with all the wrestling in this show. There's only 4 matches, and we'll spend some time. There's a lot of backstage stuff with the wedding, and Hernandez comes after Fallah Bahh. Fallah Bahh says he doesn't have the money. I only took the money from you for Johnny Bravo. And Bravo finds out that he told Hernandez about the money. And he's like, listen, I'm going to tell Hernandez that you have the money still, because you do. And I never told you to take it from him. So he's going to whoop your ass. It was just, it was kind of a mess of a backstage. It was an extra storyline that's.
It was extraneous, and I didn't really follow. And I was just kind of half paying attention during it. It just seemed like filler.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a lot of this episode feels like, is a lot of filler just to get to the wedding. Because no real reason for Triple XL and the Rascals to wrestle a third or maybe 4th time in the past 2 weeks. They have good matches together, and I'll say that. And I do want to point out that Larry D and AC Romero, obviously both really doing an awesome job, losing a lot of weight, getting healthier. And they were already talented wrestlers before weight loss. Weight loss is not, giving them any more value in any sort of way, other than, hopefully it's making them healthier and be more in control of that that aspect of their personal lives.
They're still dwarf most of the guys that they're in the ring with.
Sure, right.
Even after losing 100 pounds. So
right. I mean, AC Romero went from 475 to 375. And a lot of people are still very listen, tune out Twitter comments. Just don't, if you want to read what the people that you follow post, do that. Don't read the threads, because it will show you just this ugly side of humanity, especially in professional wrestling Twitter.
Yeah.
There's no reason whatsoever to talk about, oh, I doubt you've lost that much weight. Man, 475 to 375 is a huge deal.
That's a whole person.
It's a whole person. And you know what? Our hats off to both AC and then Larry's. I don't think lost that much, but they both have slimmed up. They're really trying to get better at their craft. I thought they performed pretty well here with the Rascals, who are, of course, a couple of really lightweight cruiserweights.
Yeah.
Des and Wentz.
They have some good chemistry between the two teams. Triple XL, they have their style, and then the Rascals have their high flying, RLPW style. And you really wouldn't think they would mesh together that well, but they play off each other pretty well, I think. So I enjoyed all the matches they've had.
They do, and I think that's probably why we get that match again here, is just because, like, okay, well, we've got some clear audibles. Maybe there was supposed to be a Heath and Rhino thing this episode, and they had to pivot from it. Oh, we got to throw a tag team match out there. We can't run back, Motor City Machine Guns because Shelly's not ready. So throw out this one, right? And it's a match that you can go to, obviously. And they do a pretty good job. They actually, Triple XL gets the win from a Larry D splash, which I did not think that we'd ever see. But like I mentioned, he's lost some weight. He's looking pretty good. And it was it wasn't like the prettiest splash ever. It kind of flailed a little bit when he jumped. But for a man of that stature to get up on the top rope and do it, hats off to him.
Yeah, definitely. Take some courage, take some skill.
Yes, and big ups. I believe it was Dez who ate the splash. After working a match to take a splash from a guy that's twice your size, even though it was a safe splash. There was no it hit where it was supposed to. That still can't feel like $1 million. I can't imagine. But kudos to those guys. Great match for a Tuesday night. Probably the match of the night. If we don't, from a traditional
match.
Traditional match. The hardcore Halloween match was the best match of the night. There's not much to say about this next one. They did during Bound for Glory. They announced that they're bringing back the Knockouts tag team titles, which is awesome. They obviously have a bunch of teams already set up to kind of go for this. One of those teams is obviously Kiera Hogan and Tasha Steelz. And of course, they have kind of a funny backstage moment where Alicia Edwards is kind of left going like, well, who wants to be a partner with me? Like, I got to find a partner. Like, what's going on here? And Tennille is in part of that group, standing by with Caleb with a K. Jordan Grace is standing there. They're kind of the three that are left waiting. Jordan and Tennille exchange a glance and just go, no. And then they walk off. Kiera Hogan and Tasha Steelz try to bully Alicia a little bit about not having a partner. And Jordan says, you know what? I'll be your partner tonight. We're going to teach these girls a lesson. And so that's our final wrestling match of the night, is a Knockouts tag team match between Kiera Hogan and Tasha Steelz versus Alicia Edwards and Jordan Grace. And I think my favorite part of this match was Alicia Edwards trying to flex like Jordan Grace during their intro. and that's not to take away from the wrestling in the ring, because the girls worked their asses off. But she definitely at one point, Jordan does her turnbuckle spot when she does her intro and does the big flex. And in the corner of the screen, you see Alicia standing on the bottom rope, throwing up a flex. And you can see Kiera Hogan and Tasha Steelz are like laughing at it, right? Like they're not in character. Like they're having such a hard time just because we know Big Mama Pump has got much larger arms than Alicia Edwards does.
Definitely.
But getting into the match a little bit, it was fun. It wasn't anything spectacular, so to speak.
No, it kind of seemed more like a filler match. It was okay. They kind of slightly building towards the Knockouts tag title tournament, but really nothing of substance really happened during it.
No, I think probably the best move of the match was Alicia Edwards went for a tag, and Tasha Steelz caught her midair, and actually took a couple of steps and turned it into a spine buster. which is pretty nice. Yeah, you don't really see a lot of strength moves out of Hogan or Steels. Pretty solid there out of Tasha Steels. She, of course, gets a roll up on Alicia Edwards with a schoolgirl, not to be confused with the schoolboy roll up. The schoolgirl roll up.
School person.
School person. That's the wrestling for the show. I do want to point out possibly the next feud for Moose is Willie Mack after he assaults him in the parking lot. After a conversation they had earlier in the night when Moose confronted Rich, because of course Willie Mack and Rich Swann are best friends. Willie Mack keeps losing for Rich Swann for Rich Swann's honor. He's got to stop doing that.
Yeah.
Stop picking fights with guys
Stand
bigger
up for
than
yourself.
Exactly. And I love this show loves Willie Mack, so we definitely we want Willie to win something. That's why we pointed it out.
Well, I think those guys can have some good matches, as long as I don't want to see a cinematic match between the two, but they're both big athletic guys. They could probably go.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be, like you said, that's a great point out of you, because I think that match will be awesome. And I don't think it lasts all the way to Hard to Kill. Maybe we get that with the November or the December network special on Impact Plus. We'll see. We got two minor cards to fill for those shows, and of course Hard to Kill in January. So we'll see how that goes. But let's talk about what is the main event, so to speak.
Everybody's favorite thing in wrestling: weddings.
It's a wrestling wedding. Wrestling weddings, as you know, Dan, never go wrong.
Right? I've never seen one go right. I've seen a lot of wrestling weddings in my time.
What's your favorite wrestling wedding?
I guess one kind of went right with Macho Man and Elizabeth.
True. Until it went wrong later on when they unfortunately divorced.
But we've seen what was it? Teddy Long and Crystal. I think they got married once on SmackDown, and that went bad. There was Dawn Marie and Tori Wilson's dad, Al Wilson, had a wedding that went wrong.
Yes.
Billy and Chuck were supposed to get married during SmackDown one time, and I think that went wrong. Test and Stephanie, that's probably one of the greatest horrible weddings of all time.
That one was oof. I don't know that I can condone the subject matter necessarily for that one. I'm looking through a list of wrestling weddings here. Stacy Keibler and David Flair and Monday Night Raw back
Classic.
in 2000. Billy and Chuck, you're correct. We're supposed to get married. Bischoff made sure that didn't happen. This is post WCW.
This is when he put makeup off, right?
Yes, I believe so. Let's see. Kane and Lita. Edge and Lita. Come on, Lita. Shout out to Amy Dumas though. Edge and Vicky Guerrero. How can you forget?
Oh.
And then we've had a few in Impact as well. Kurt and Karen Angle. We'll loosen up the shirt collar for what happened there. And then Jay Lethal and SoCal Val also were married at Slammiversary in 2008.
Nice.
Well, I should say we're going to be, but it was interrupted by the best man Sanjay Dutt and George the Animal Steel, Kamala, Birdman, Coco Beware, and Jake the Snake were all in attendance for that wedding at Slammiversary. Because
it's an all-star cast.
You got to get a paycheck. So
I love all those guys.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's a pretty star-studded thing there. But here we have the wedding of Johnny Bravo and the demon assassin Rosemary. There is a few too many references to Johnny Bravo's virginal blood for my liking.
It kind of harped on that quite a bit.
A lot.
For a family show kind of pushed the limits there.
It's well documented. I watch wrestling with my 4 and my 3-year-old quite a bit. Thankfully, I don't really watch a whole lot of Impact with them because when we started doing this podcast, of course, Rob Van Dam and Katie Forbes were still a part of the roster. And I just don't need my son at 4 years old watching Katie Forbes twerk across the television screen right now. And not because there's anything wrong with what she's doing, but because, quite frankly, I don't want to have that conversation right now. But we see the culmination of Havoc, who lost to Rosemary last week, agrees to bring back Father James Mitchell. And Father James Mitchell comes back to officiate the wedding.
Scary dude.
He is, yeah. I mean, you want to talk, so we talked about, okay, Su Yung is pretty intimidating. And we do need to go back to Su Yung here in a minute because we completely skipped that segment. Maybe we won't go back. We'll just say Su Yung came out and attacked Deonna Purrazzo after her lawyer demanded that Scott D'Amore put the belt back on Purrazzo. And Scott D'Amore, of course, said, no, you get your rematch. And
yeah, it was a long, drawn out.
It was multiple segments.
And
I will say that the barrister and Kimberly both ate mandible claws. And when Scott D'Amore tried to break it up, he did get red mist.
I did like that part.
That was pretty cool. That was pretty badass.
Sucker for mist.
I mean, who isn't, right?
Right.
So back to the wedding. Now that we've touched on, where that's going to be, I guess next week we're going to see the Knockouts title match. The wedding starts. The bridal party comes out. Of course, Swinger, Falaba, Swoggle is now a part of the bridal party because I guess
he's all over this show.
He is. I mean, hey, listen, man, Dylan, get your paychecks, dude. Seriously, I think he just had a book come out, or if it's been out for a little bit.
I don't know.
So definitely check out the book if you're a fan of books or wrestlers or wrestling books. I guess, right?
Is it a short story?
Oh God. You're going to hell for that. Just so you're aware. But yeah, the Deaners are out there. Crazy Steve, Alicia Edwards, Taya Valkyrie. They're all a part of the bridal party, of course. They go through the vows. Bravo is wearing a white suit with purple secondary colors. Looks pretty sharp, if you ask me, with the exception of the top hat and, of course, the Valkyrie earmuffs. Which, why not, I guess.
Special touch just from her.
Right, exactly. Rosemary is kind of Beetlejuice adjacent here with her outfit. The vows from Bravo were very strange. And then Rosemary gives a paragraph and a half, 2 paragraphs of memorized dialogue that I thought it was actually pretty good.
So
and maybe it wasn't memorized
for a second.
So,
like I talked about on the last show, I haven't been watching Impact a real long time. I don't know anything about Johnny Bravo other than wasn't he a referee at one point?
Yes, he was a referee, and then eventually revealed to be on the side of Johnny Impact, who of course we know also as John Morrison, and his wife in real life. I don't know that I believe they were married in the show as well, Taya Valkyrie. And so now Bravo is still managing technically Taya, but because of the Rosemary Taya friendship, he got to know Rosemary, and then eventually through Russell House fell in love, and now here we are.
So my next question about Mr. Bravo goes back to our discussion earlier about The Rock with copyright law. Like Johnny Bravo was a cartoon, right, on Cartoon Network.
Yes.
How does he just get to be called Johnny Bravo? Did Turner not trademark that name?
It's because of spelling. So Johnny Bravo, the cartoon, is Johnny Bravo. This is John E. Bravo. So John, then a space, then a middle initial of E, and then Bravo. So yes, no. It sounds exactly the same when you say it. There's no difference. That's how phonetics works.
Right.
But yeah, I agree. It took me looking at the Impact roster back when we started this to understand that it was not Johnny, it was John E.
Okay. Very carny.
Very much so. Very much so. And of course, Tommy Dreamer is a part of the bridal party too. And probably the most important part, and I'll get to that as to why shortly here. It looks like Crazy Steve, by the way, he's like dressed up like a Catholic priest, which I thought was interesting, and also walked Rosemary to the aisle, which goes back to an older, back in the archives. If you want to learn about the alliance of Rosemary and Crazy Steve and all that stuff going back, you can go check that out in your own time. I'm not going to delve into that tonight.
Nope. Let's move forward.
We're moving forward. So we have the vows. Like I said, Rosemary gives a pretty good performance. She really knows her character in and out, right? I did think it was funny, and just from a production standpoint, everyone comes out to the ring with this, kind of stock wedding music. And then when it's time for Rosemary to walk down the aisle, they hit her Titantron and her music.
It's the way to do it.
Instead of Here Comes the Bride, right? Just the cemetery song, whatever that crooning emo guy is singing about.
Right.
So, I just thought it was a funny touch. The whole time, they keep on making these little, is it, Bravo at one point's like, and I'm going to marry her, and no one's going to keep me from doing that. And everyone just stops, looks around.
Well,
okay,
as
during
wrestling weddings, somebody always has to
They definitely acknowledge the tropes.
Speak now or forever hold your peace, right?
Exactly. They acknowledge the tropes.
They even acknowledge it.
Yeah, and then I think Rosemary says something, and Father Mitchell is like looking around again, like, no, okay, well then I think he says something like, by the power invested in me by the Lord below, or something like, some reference to Satan, of course. Because if you look at his eyebrows, I mean, this guy's eyebrows are pure like Satan energy, right?
He's scary dude, man. He's super creepy.
He is, and it'll be interesting to see how else he shows up in this whole ordeal here. But when he says, "You may now kiss the bride," we have the lights go out here.
We're getting a lights out match.
We're getting the lights out. I thought Cody Rhodes might be there for a second.
Oh God.
But no, it was not. And in fact, when the lights come on, of course, we see a flash of light when the lights with the sound of a gunshot, and the lights come on, and Bravo is lying in the middle of the ring, dead.
Now, are we sure he's dead?
So I'm looking at. I'm on Impact's website right now on my secondary screen, and they keep showing the scene where he gets shot, and he's lying there. And the blood is pouring out of what can only be described as where the heart is. So I think they wanted to make sure that everyone walks away. Now, if he's actually dead, we don't know. It's professional wrestling.
Yeah.
Lots of people have
died.
died.
He comes back at some point, Josh.
But he might. My theory is that he might come back kind of undead.
Be fitting, right?
We play in this realm of the undead quite a bit here on Impact.
She might resurrect him.
She might. I mean, she needed that virginal blood for something.
Yeah. So,
and if she didn't, they've mentioned it way too much for it to not be a plot point.
Right.
But as we see Bravo lying bloodied and shot, we see none other than Tommy Dreamer. Because, by the way, this is a costume party Halloween wedding, and he's dressed up, of course, as his good friend Animal still, and he climbs on top of Bravo's body and does the old pan out shot Y moment. Right. And I know it's supposed to be corny, and I bit into it, so I laughed when Tommy hit him with the Y, because it is it's full on Tommy Dreamer giving it all.
Yeah, that's what I found enjoyable about it, is these guys aren't taking it seriously. They know how goofy it is, and they're just, leaning way into it.
Yeah, way into it. One thing I didn't like is that about the wedding is that Father Mitchell does call Swoggle the ring imp. I listen. Yeah. Dylan obviously wouldn't have let him say that if he was uncomfortable with it.
I think it was more the demonic side rather than the
right,
hype
but
side.
also
But yeah,
we know imps are
great.
small creatures.
Right.
So yeah,
You could
but
have
I
said
mean,
ring demon or something. Yeah.
yeah, or just who's got the rings? Something. I mean, he didn't need to call attention to it that way. But maybe that's me being a millennial and being overly cautious about that type of thing. I personally wouldn't have said it.
Yeah.
Just because like I said, even if Dylan was all cool about it and like told him to say it, you never know. You just don't want to put anybody in that position. But that's Impact Wrestling for this week. Interesting fallout from the pay-per-view. Not a whole lot of it, other than the cash in of the rematch clause by Eric Young that was quickly dismissed. Too fast to actually be done, as we said earlier. We're going to have a rematch next week for the Knockouts Championship. And then there's a couple other random. I think Chris Bay is going to wrestle Trey Miguel next week. There's no implications of anything. Just that's what's going to happen.
Just RLPW. That's all it needs to be.
Yeah, and I hope they give that about a 7-minute slot, 8-minute slot at least. Because Impact is pretty good about giving everyone but the main event about the same amount of time. And the main event of the wrestling portion is always going to go a little longer, typically. But Tommy Dreamer clocks in with the longest match of this week's Impact at 11 minutes 43 seconds. And I think Tommy Dreamer, he's got some more tricks up his sleeve for Brian Myers. I don't think that one's done either.
I was going to ask you about that. Do you think they keep going with that? I mean, you think Brian gets his win back next week or in a couple weeks?
Well, I mean, Brian's already got 2 on him, right? I mean, to have a third match and then the other guy win to make it 2-1, to me it seems like they're going to continue it. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't see where Brian's going to go otherwise, because it seems like he's a character that would not want to pursue the X Division Championship, but rather the main title, the Impact World Championship. It's hard to say. It really is. I mean, and then the Motor City Machine Guns tease they want to cash in their rematch as soon as Shelley is ready. Triple XL attacks them backstage to say that they want their shot. They've been beating everybody around, is what AC says. When actually in reality, I think they've beaten the Deaners once and the Rascals twice. So
hot streak.
Hot streak, and and listen, AC I'm sure is aware of that too when he said it. He just has to sell the match, man. Got to bring the gate in, so they say. But I thought it was all around pretty good week for them.
I thought it was a pretty good show. I mean, it went by pretty quick. Some of the backstage segments drug a little bit. The only real segment I didn't like was the Deanna and that barrister segment.
Yeah, agreed.
But everything was pretty good. It left on a cliffhanger, So now I got to tune in next week, find out what. Now, do you think they're going to reveal what happened, or are they going to string this out?
I think this doesn't get. I think this doesn't get resolved until the network special for the month, if not later. It feels like a bigger story. I feel like I'm going to go ahead and give my prediction for who shot Bravo, and I think people are going to try and theorize and come up with these grandiose things. Maybe Rosemary had it set up because she just needed his blood, and with him shot, she can get it, and whatever, right? I think it was just purely over the money that Father Boss stole. I think Hernandez shot him.
Yeah, well, they kind of hinted at that earlier in the show when Hernandez was kind of whooping on him. On
Father Boss, yeah. So
it might just be the simplest explanation, right?
And we're seeing with Impact, they're not afraid to just stick with what is right in front of you. And they've definitely predicted what's happening in later shows with commentary and with, other things that are happening. So to me, I think that's the simplest thing. I can't really see it being anyone else. Truthfully.
They could go really wacky, or they, like you said, they could just go straight forward. Like, here, we already told you this is what's going to happen, so this is what happened. So let me ask you this: how do you feel about a gun murder on your wrestling? As a father watching this with your kids,
Well, like I said, yeah, thankfully my kids don't really tune into the weekly Impact show with me. There has been stuff like the kids have walked in before, when Moose bloodied EC3's face um, on the boardwalk a couple weeks ago, in the lead up to this pay-per-view, that I had to, shoo Molly out of the room, because she likes to come and sit in my lap and watch wrestling when I'll have my work going on my computer, and I'll have wrestling going up on a second screen, and she'll like to come and sit and watch the wrestling with me. I've been typically tending to do Impact when they're not around, just because there are some things, like I mentioned, that have kind of been like, I don't want to explain that right now to a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old. Um, but yeah, they didn't see the gunshot, so okay for me right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it certainly, when you're talking TV PG wrestling, I don't know. I don't think they need to do it. I'm not offended by it.
Yeah.
There's guns in damn near everything these days. So
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really like it. I don't like guns being introduced in wrestling. It's kind of crossing a line with me. I'm not gonna like totally decry it because I want to see where the story goes. Maybe it won't even be
sure,
a gun. Maybe it'll be something else. Who
right?
knows?
Yeah, it could be right. It could
Yeah,
be
I
some
mean,
demonic power that shot out of Rosemary, or
right.
Father James Mitchell could do something. Who knows?
Yeah. I just don't
So
want it to be like something that occurs a lot where we're getting in like gang warfare with guns and stuff in my
right, yeah,
wrestling. That's a little too much.
which
So,
with Hernandez, I would trust a larger company that we are aware of to take the stereotype of Hernandez and make it into a gang warfare thing.
oh God.
And thankfully, right, exactly. See, you know exactly where that would go. Um, Thankfully, I don't think that's really a thing that Impact has ever really fallen into, at least, not since dropping the TNA branding, right?
Yeah.
They typically stay away from stereotypes. They've been really good about, true intergender wrestling, and making that, feel like it's an actual wrestling match and not a gimmick. And really, treating the talent as talent. So hopefully that stays true, and this is something that pays off in a good way. Uh, but we'll see. I mean, I'll be the first one to say that it didn't work, um, but we don't know yet. I think
Yeah.
so far it's worked. It wasn't egregious. You don't see any gunshot. You don't. All you see is a flash
Right.
of light and a sound, which is probably why they were able to do it. Um,
Yeah. Very theatrical. It's not like realistic or
it's
anything.
right.
So,
It was very much like if you went to see a high school play and there was a gunshot in a high school play,
right.
the lights would go off. You'd hear a canned noise. It didn't sound too realistic, and
Right.
then one of the actors would be on
They
the ground with a
slapped a
ketchup
couple of
packet.
2x4s together.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean that kind of that closes the book on this week's Impact. Dan, thanks again for jumping on in a pinch.
Yeah, no problem.
Before you
I
go,
always enjoy my time here and discussing Impact. It's a good
yeah,
time.
right. I mean, we're the only show on the network doing it. And before I let you get out of here, I do want to ask you if you got a favorite video game that you'd recommend for Halloween.
Well, I tell you what, it's not really a new game because I just talked about it with you a few weeks ago. But, since I talked to you, I replayed the Batman games.
There you go.
And I'm trying to 100% Arkham Knight right now, which I never did before. I got to the Riddler trophies and just kind of moved on.
Sure. Yeah, like most
But
of us.
now
Yeah.
I'm just like, I get motivated to do it. But there's a lot of horror elements in those games, which
There is.
it's kind of surprising. I mean, you've got the Man Bat jumping out at you. The Joker's just evil and like evil clown. The Scarecrow he's like a demon. There's a lot of horror elements to it. It's kind of like a Halloween style game.
Yeah, there is, and that's a great recommendation. I gave mine in the top of the episode with Layne, so check out both parts of our episode. Really fun stuff. Of course, tune into all of the podcasts here on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. Of course, you got One Nation Radio, Keeping It Strong Style, the Ricky and Clive Wrestling Show, All Things Elite. We got the Grave Consequences podcast. Scroll them and watch this shit. and of course, the Great Match Generator, and of course, yours truly here on the 8-Bit Suplex. Hopefully, we'll get Sandy back next week, and hopefully, she's feeling better. We're thinking about you, Sandy.
Get well, Sandy.
And definitely go out and have a great, safe, socially distanced, mask wearing Halloween. If you're doing any trick or treating with your kids, be super careful with it. We are going to do one street on my in-laws' street, and we're kind of packaging my mother-in-law's birthday is thankfully November 2nd, so we're going to do Halloween / her birthday over at my in-laws, and then we're going to have the kids do like a quick loop up the street with some neighbors that we know, and can kind of do a little bit of contact tracing back if we had to.
It's crazy that we have to put this much thought into it, right?
It really is. Especially for kids that they just want to do trick or treating and have things back to normal. And if more adults could act like adults and not like children, we would have already been able to do that. But that's a different podcast that we get into that. But Dan, have a safe one, man.
You too.
We'll talk to you next time, and I'm sure I'll probably talk to you in our Facebook group chat when we hang up here.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. And once again, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for stopping on.